but they will be attending. So we'll go to public question time and receiving of public statements. Welcome members of the public gallery. It's a pleasure to see you here this evening. We invite you to make a statement or ask questions. We just do ask that you state your name, your suburb that you reside in, and the item that you're speaking to if you're addressing an item on the agenda this evening. There is no order, just as you wish to come up, and we do allocate 3 minutes per speaker. We do also live stream public question time, so if you have any concerns about that, please do let me know before you speak. So I'd like to welcome the first speaker forward. Is anyone speaking this evening? Yes, thank you. Yeah, that'll be great, thanks.
Shall I start again? Yeah, okay. My name is Peter Arnoldi. I live at 23 Eden Street and my house frontage is directly across the road from the rear of Fibre Active. I am here today to object to Fibre Active of 305 Fitzgerald Street proposed changes to hours and increase in patrons. Eden Street is a 6.5 metre narrow street that provides front access to the residential properties of Eden Street as well as the rear access to commercial properties facing Fitzgerald Street. The noise management plan is not the solution because of the change of conditions are extending the problem rather than solving it. Firstly, the excessive noise does not impact the commercially zoned Fitzgerald Street frontage. The problem arises when Fibre Active's rear roller door, which is directly on Eden Street and adjacent to residential houses, is open. This unreasonable noise disturbance when the roller door is open onto Eden Street and my bedrooms and living space is unacceptable. How would you like it if you had noise blasting into your home every day from 5:30 to 8 o'clock at night, 6 days a week? There should be no amplified music before 7 a.m. or after 7 p.m. or loud instructions yelled out to the patrons by the staff. This is not an industrial area where the noise emanated from a CrossFit gym would be acceptable. The current 15-minute pauses between classes currently gives us respite between classes. Should the council approve this change, then they are effectively giving Fibre Active a licence to continuously open and operate all day and night except Sundays. The additional 5 patrons on top of the current 5 trainers and 15 people are going to add a considerable amount of street noise at 5:15 as they enter through the rear door because they park on Eden Street. The weights are continuously dropped regardless, as stated in the proposal, being a safety issue. This is a standard practice to drop weights, as their website and information on CrossFit gyms says. They do have control over the weights and the current mats need to be changed to commercial grade mats or mats that are adequate enough to absorb the shock. Nothing about the mats has ever been discussed with myself or my wife, nor have we ever received phone numbers to contact either the current or previous owners of the gym to discuss any health and safety issues we may have. Second, as per the City of Vincent Town Planning Scheme number 2, the zone objectives under the powers of the Planning and Development Act 2005 state the following. Under commercial on page 9, to ensure that development is not detrimental to the amenity of adjoining owners or residential properties in the locality. We would have less of a problem if the roller door would be permanently closed and insulated against sound and noise, and only having member access through Fitzgerald Street. If Fibre Active doesn't close the roller door permanently, then council approval decision needs to favour the residents for a reasonable balance of conditions according to the City of Vincent Town Planning Scheme number 2, meaning that commercial should not interfere with residential properties. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. That was a fantastic first effort at a council meeting and perfectly timed. Next speaker, please.
Glasses, sorry. My name is Monique Anoldi and I'm also here today to object to the changes of conditions of Fibre Active as a representative of our rental properties on Eden Street, which is our only source of income. Along with my husband's comments, there is a lot in the background papers that we could argue with, but that is not the purpose of this meeting tonight. We have to get to the key issues, which are the commercial zone fronts onto Fitzgerald Street. Our residential zoned properties on Eden Street front onto the rear of Fibre Active. If the impact only went to Fitzgerald Street, there would not be a noise problem. The problem arises because they have a massive roller door that is constantly open onto residential properties of Eden Street. That the excessive noise, particularly when the trainers are yelling above the music, is so unbelievable that I have supplied and sent video evidence of the noise and weights being dropped to the council to justify our rights to peace. To be woken up by your bed shaking because of the weights being dropped is quite shocking and an uncomfortable experience. Would you like to be woken up by noise or weights being dropped? It's like being hit by an earthquake, not to mention the damage it has impacted on our premise properties. We have in the past spoken directly to the gym owners when we see them, and the disturbances do temporarily stop. However, we have never been given any phone numbers of any owners when there has been a problem, nor have they discussed the mats being altered to absorb the vibrations with us. Recently, we became aware of the current hours of operation via an email from Sonia Woodside from the town of Vincent, because we complained to the council about the noise. In her email, she states that the current hours of operation shall be limited to 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Monday to Friday and 7 a.m. to 12 p.m. Saturday. Please note that at this point, the city is not enforcing the gym commencement at 6 a.m. instead of 5:30 a.m. because the city is concerned the gym could adversely affect amenity to surrounding properties if operated between 5:30 and 6 a.m. It has now become quite apparent to us that Fibre Active has totally disregarded their neighbours, that the current and previous owners of the gym have continuously worked outside the parameters of council approval by being open the majority of the day, including occasional training on Sundays. This is genuinely concerning as residents of City of Vincent that the council has not enforced Fibre Active's current hours of operation. So what is going to stop Fibre Active from complying to any of the council rules? Even people living next to building sites get some sort of respite. I do not see this as any different. A CrossFit gym should only be able to operate in an industrial zone. However, they have council approval. So I'm asking you to please consider us when making your final decision to extend the hours and additional patrons, change of use of warehouse to recreational private. Finally, I would like to reiterate that if Fibre Active don't close the roller door permanently, then the council approved decision needs to favour the residents for a reasonable balance of conditions according to the City of Vincent Town Planning Scheme 2, meaning that the commercial should not interfere with the residential properties. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name's Richard Zelensky, 67 Paddington Street. I'm talking on item 5.2, Fibre Active Gym. My property is directly adjacent to the Fibre Active Gym. For the last 6 years, we've had to put up with this noise pollution. We've approached the previous owners and also current owners, and where the thumping noise that we that is created through the gym, in fact, vibrates our building. Now, we have over the years provided noise logs to the council. We've complained to the council. I have recently just had tenants in the building that had to vacate. We had to break their lease for them, and being a retiree, and that's my source of income, I allowed them to break the lease purely for the fact that they couldn't, they were shift workers and couldn't sleep, and also they approached the owners on the issue of the noise and were told virtually, look, you knew there was a gym there, so what? The tenants also submitted noise logs to the council, and I wonder what's ever happened to them because we don't get any feedback on that, and they've been submitted, as I said, by my staff, by ourselves and tenants over the years. I strongly object to the fact that this gym can continue to operate in the way it has been. We've had to put up a lot with our clients coming into the building and listening to the shuddering noise of these weights being dropped from shoulder height, 60 to 80 kilos, onto a floor without any matting or, to subdue the weight noise. They suggested that they'd put 40 millimetre mats. They're virtually like a playpen mat. That's not going to absorb the noise. If you are going to put mats down, there are obviously industry standard mats, and I would think that have to be somewhere in the vicinity of about 40. I'm not an expert, 60 centimetres. So the noise factor and the vibration that emanates from that building is quite disturbing to us, and we've had to put up with it for, as I said, 6 years. We had calm when we first moved into the building for 2 years, and after that it's just been one headache after another. As I said, I lost tenants based on the fact that they couldn't stay there, and that cost us thousands of dollars, and that's been a direct cost to me and also my retirement. So I strongly object to the proposal being put forward on the development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please. Anyone? We'll close public question time. All right, we still have some interest. Come forward. Thank you.
Oops. Good evening, Mayor, councillors and administration. My name is Vernon Gardam. I live in Mount Lawley. I'd like to speak about item 7.2, adoption of property management framework, and the paper and attachments for consideration this evening. As an interested party, I received an email notice of this meeting sent yesterday at 10:37 a.m. It appeared that it was sent to all sporting and community groups that are stakeholders. Almost all stakeholders are run by volunteers. Based on an experience, I know that emails sent to most community groups prompt an automated email response to the effect, "Thank you for your email. This facility is staffed by a small team of volunteers and is checked weekly. A committee member will be in touch with you shortly or in due course." I expect the sender of the email got a lot of similar responses. I checked randomly 3 selected community groups early this morning and, as expected, got an automated "thank you for your email" response. Community partnerships should be aware that small volunteer groups operate via committees and that 24 hours notice is inadequate for the group to meet, consider the issue and prepare a response. In other words, the notice for this evening's meeting was too short. Not only is this disrespectful to the volunteers, and the likely effect is community groups will be denied the opportunity to put their views, essentially disenfranchised by inadequate notice. This paper should be delayed for two reasons. The first reason is to provide, not only is this disrespectful to the volunteers, and I'm getting feedback. Yep, this paper should be delayed for two reasons. The first reason is to provide volunteer community and sporting groups reasonable time to receive the notice, to meet, consider these issues and prepare a response. The second reason is to give administration the opportunity to proofread the paper and the attachments to it. In relation to the paper itself, it's a surprise to me because at the briefing meeting of 10th March, Mayor Cole said that Vincent would not charge different lease fees for similar facilities based on the facility's location within the city. Essentially, lease fees should be based on the facility and not the location. This was a view expressed in relation to playgroups. It is equally applicable to a pavilion and a fenced area of a sporting facility, be it a bowling green, tennis court or croquet court. The question of whether the use of GRV as a lease fee settling method is fair and equitable, given GRV location-based, is raised. At a briefing meeting on the 8th of September, Councillor Toppelberg...
Vern, just to let you know, you have gone beyond the 3 minutes, so could you just make your final comments?
Okay, I will try and condense it down as much as I can. But
Thank you.
There is significant problems in terms of the attachments that are half-baked and incorrect.
Vern, do you have something that you'd like to email through to us during the week, or is it...
I'm quite prepared to sit down and do that. It'll probably give me a chance to reflect on what's going on.
And you still have concerns about the proofreading of the document?
Yes. Monstrous. You know my old favourite, the Highgate Playgroup at 127 Wright Street? They haven't moved. They're still there. And that table that it appears in is headed up the name of the sporting body, and in the column below we have a series of addresses. It's shoddy work.
Vern, do you have a marked up copy or anything that you'd like to leave with us to perhaps photocopy or...
No, what I will do is send in a submission that would be more convenient for me and for you, because it will show that I'm effectively working from highlighted pages.
Yes.
But I would like to mention that at the briefing meeting of 8th September, Councillor Toppelberg requested administration to provide alternative methods possible to determine lease fees and requested advice as why GRV was the preferred choice. Nothing appears in this paper about alternate lease fee setting methods. And on the 8th of September, you, Mayor Cole, also indicated that Council will retain the power to determine whether or not a tenant is beneficial to the city, and there would not be a delegation of lease powers to the CEO. None of these things are reflected in the paper that is before us.
Vern, you're also, if you would like to, you can make a deputation at the council meeting next week where you can speak for up to 15 minutes.
I don't think you'd really want me speaking
Well-
for 15 minutes.
Well, I think we're almost getting there. So what I'm trying to say is we probably...
I take the point, Mayor
But you are
Crowell.
you have excellent feedback to provide, and you're very welcome to have a deputation next week if you would like to.
I will think about that, but I'll certainly provide you with updates on the items that I have mentioned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Vern.
your indulgence.
Thank you, appreciate it.
I'm John Gartner. I'm a resident in Menora and I'm the president of the Forest Park Croquet Club. I wish to thank the City of Vincent Council for the ability to ask questions on the property management framework. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the acceptance of several of Forest Park Croquet Club's concerns by Council and the subsequent amendments to the property management framework to address those issues. The retention of the long-term maintenance of buildings by the City of Vincent will be a significant relief to the Category 1 and 2 clubs and organisations. My first question, I attended a meeting with Virginia Miltrop and Karen Baum after I had requested a meeting with Emma Cole on the 15th of October, in which the property management framework was discussed. Where in the Council briefing agenda of the 10th of November is the acknowledgement that the meeting occurred? What were the subjects discussed? What were the proposals contained in those discussions? And what was the outcome of the deliberations by City staff of those proposals? Question 2. The property management framework contains a matrix. It's attachment 11, the matrix criteria for determining the level of subsidy for leases and licenses for not-for-profit organisations. Has the City undertaken an analysis of the matrix for each of the clubs and organisations in Category 1 and 2, which might be affected by the application of the matrix? If it has, what is the effect on each club or organisation level of subsidy? If it hasn't, why not? Also, does the City currently collect sufficient information from clubs and organisations to do a thorough assessment? And what additional information would be required to do that assessment? Has the impact of collecting that additional information on clubs and organisations been assessed? Thank you.
Thank you, John. We'll come to those questions when we ask questions on this item. Are there any further speakers this evening? Yes. Oh, yes, that's correct. Thank you for reminding me. Before we come to that, I'll just check whether there's any final speakers for public question time. Yes, please come forward. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alex. I'm a resident of the City of Vincent, and I'm also a member of a local gym. Now, on your agenda tonight,
Sorry, Alex, we do ask for people's full name and suburb in which they reside, if you'd be okay with that.
Yeah, no worries. Alexander Zlatko-Petrovsky in West Perth.
Thank you.
Great. So I'm a member of a local community gym here, and this item will be going to council next week for a decision. So I'm going to run you through where we have got to since that time and why you should support this application. So the world is an interesting place, and COVID has thrown many of our lives into disarray. The gym was forced to close by the Australian government, and then following WA's really good job of blocking out coronavirus, we were allowed to open again through the Department of Health and the Australian government. Now, we were operating as we've always been operating for roughly 7 years now, and we were then contacted by the City of Vincent, who had some complaints and inquiries about how we were operating. Notwithstanding any of this, we were actually allowed to operate by the City of Vincent's own exemptions policy, which it passed, I believe, in March 2020 in response to COVID. So we received some complaints regarding noise and vibrations, and we undertook immediately to have an amended application to our development approval. Now we understand that we were not operating within the times of our previous approval many years ago. However, those times were, I wouldn't say, to be valid operating times for a local community business in a flexible contemporary environment. So what happened after that was we were then subject to some noise monitoring and testing. And what we didn't know was that the property next door was changed from commercial to residential. This has been commercial for a number of years, and this changed the level of monitoring and the assigned levels under the noise regulations. So we went from operating normally as a commercial facility and having noise regulations for a commercial facility to one of a residential house right next door to us. We were not advised that this was going to occur, and in any event, we were considered to be just over about 12 decibels over the prescribed noise levels for residential. This property has now reverted back to commercial. So there is no instances in the recent past that we have exceeded or gone anywhere near to exceeding the noise levels allowable for commercial properties in this area. We have now put in a planning application to consider expanding our times, and with that we were asked to submit a sound attenuation policy. However, this is not considered to be appropriate for the level of change that we're seeking, and the main change is for 5:30 a.m. operating commencement rather than from the 6 a.m. previously approved by council. So we prepared...
Alex, you have met your 3 minutes. I've been quite lenient today, so if you could just make your final remarks, that would be appreciated.
No worries.
Thank you.
We have prepared a planning application that is consistent with the planning framework and all the other relevant regulatory legislation that exists, and we recommend that the council approves this. Now, we've received some changes to the conditions later on this afternoon. What I would say is that many of the conditions originally proposed were not valid planning conditions, and the amended changes go somewhat to that, and we just recommend removing the day limits that are imposed, as they will put us into the Christmas break, and in any event are not valid and are captured.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank
If
you.
you have any other concerns, please email us during the week. You're welcome back next week as well. Are there any further questions or statements during public question time? Yes, thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bjorn Voon, and I am the owner of Fibre Active, a gym in West Perth. We are a small business, and it's run by me and my wife. And being a small business and in the fitness industry, it's enough to get us by. And safe to say, we're not going to be millionaires anytime soon. As you can all appreciate, in these current times, it's really difficult to run any business. And with everything changed after we've returned back from COVID, we were told that, we were making too much noise. It's not easy running a business. Like I said, it's also not easy to see your members lose their jobs. But once we were told that we're making far too much noise, being reasonable neighbors, we put into place measures to stop and minimize any of these noise issues. We like to be part of the community as well, and we don't want to be those guys that, do their own thing. And so we were trying to amend our DAs to allow us to access a specific demographic in West Perth. And as you can see, we have put this through to the public vote and support, and we had 93 support submissions for our business. And we do have a profound impact on the mental health of our community and our members. And I think that's really important, and that's what we are doing as well, to try and improve everybody's mental health in these times of crisis. And Our members, when they come to our gym, they also provide economic support to the businesses around the North Perth area as well. And it also makes North Perth look a little bit livelier at times as well. So if you read through the submissions, you'll also realize that we have helped our community to work through some of their personal struggles. And we have also lost business because we've had to revert back from 5:30 to 6 o'clock in the morning. So we've lost a lot of members because of that. And it's not the same anymore. And we would just like a fair go at running a business, without restrictions, without crazy restrictions implemented and, free from bias. So I urge you to carefully consider the impact on us as a small business and as a community. Thank you for your consideration.
Thanks, Paul. I'll just call out one last time for any more public question time speakers. We do have some written questions that have come in. We're taking written questions during the state of emergency. So I believe we have 2. Is that correct? Just one resident? Yep. So Emily's just going to read out those questions and then we'll come to the deputation. Thank you.
Question from Narelle O'Neill in regards to item 8.5. The questions are as follows. Who are the members of the cited design review panel? Does any member of the DRP have any links to the Florida Athena Football Club or Football West? 2, which of the city's elected members attended the October meeting with the club at the site? 3, as there has been no community engagement up to this point, how did the elected members accurately represent the community's wishes at that meeting, especially when determining options for the site? 4, given Lake Munga previously extended to the near Brentham Street Leederville and was a traditional hunting ground for this nation's First Peoples, will the city consider as an option demolishing the stadium, rehabilitating the site and returning it to its rightful owners? If not, why not? 5, given the club's demonstrated inability to adequately manage the site, what criteria were used to justify the city extending the club's lease of the site for a further 10 years? On what basis was the annual lease amount determined? 6, the city took over the lease of the site in October 2020 and the northeast corner of the site was recently cleared of decades of accumulated rubbish. Did the city ratepayers incur the cost of the clearing, removal and tip fees, or did the club, as lessee and owner of the accumulated rubbish? What was the total cost involved in that clearing and rubbish removal process? 7, the club does not and has never paid rates to the City of Vincent, nor properly maintained the site, and most of its members do not live in the city. So why is the club considered a more important stakeholder than local residents and ratepayers who are listed last in the project's key impacted stakeholders list? This is especially galling as it is the city ratepayers who have subsidised the club's use of and financial gain from that site for the last 20 years, and I fully expect will have to continue to do so for the next 10 years. Thank you.
I think the CEO can answer some of those questions straight away, so we'll go to the CEO.
Through you, Mayor Cole, just to provide a summary response to the questions provided in writing. The members of the city's design review panel who've assisted on this project were Damien Pericles, who is a landscape architect, and Simon Venturi, who is an architect. I do understand that Damien Pericles' son is a junior member of the Florida Athena Football Club. The elected members who have been involved in the meetings with the Florida Athena Football Club include Mayor Cole and Councillor Fotakis and some other councillors at various meetings. The point I would make in the general response to this is that the work and the project is premised on the council decision last year regarding the lease at Litter Stadium and council's decision to grant a new lease to Florida Athena Football Club just for the club room and not the entire site. And that decision was made last year. The rationale, the criteria, the lease terms the lease amount or contained in the council report from last year regarding that. And there's been a process stemming from that council decision last year to establish a working group with the club, focused particularly on the federal government's announcement of up to $3 million of grant funding to assist in some renewal works at the club. And the work up till now has been predicated on a particular issue related to the change rooms at the site. The city did demolish a condemned change room site, and the club has been in the need of change rooms since that time. And the key discussions for the project have been about how to use the allocated grant funding to create new change rooms for the club. And that's what the working group has been most focused on, with the overarching objectives of opening up the entire site for community use, particularly around the potential to bring in new sporting codes during the summer period, as well as maximising the integration between the Liddis Stadium site itself and the rest of Britannia Reserve. The lease, the club's exclusive lease for the entire site, did come to an end over the last few weeks, and we have been working with the club around the lease handover arrangements, and there has been an extensive cleanup of the site, but that has been entirely work done by the club in cooperation with the city. So it was a club cost, not a city cost. Just to note that the list of key impacted stakeholders on the project summary does not indicate any priority to their stakeholders. They are all equally valuable and important. The current work has just been around a specific issue about where to locate and potentially plan in greater detail a new change room on that site. But we are preparing an overarching concept document for community consultation in the new year, and we'll be discussing that more with council over the next few weeks. That's the summary response, Mayor Cole, and we'll provide more detailed responses in writing.
Sorry, there was just the last question was about the club having not paid lease fees.
Not paying rates.
Is it rates?
I think that the last question was about whether or not the club paid rates to the City of Vincent or maintained the site. The club has paid its lease fees during the term of the lease, and the club has been responsible for maintenance of the site over that lease term, but that now has reverted to the city.
Thank you, CEO. We now have a deputation, so I'll call forward the deputation in relation to item 5.3 Summer Street, Perth, proposed childcare premises amendment to approved. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors and city staff. My name's Nathan Stewart, a town planner from Row Group, the applicant for item 5.3. Our offices are at level 3, 369 Newcastle Street in Northbridge. This council approved an existing childcare centre back in 2016 at this site. The centre was approved with 60 children and 15 staff, and this was enforceable through condition 1.1 of the development approval. The centre has since been operating since 2017 and has been doing very, very well. Due to its success, the operator has engaged Row Group again to prepare an application to amend the development approval by increasing the number of children permitted at the centre from 60 to 63. So it's only a very slight increase. No increase to the number of staff is proposed or required, and no changes to the building are proposed or required. There's a favourable recommendation that's been put forward by the city staff, and we respectfully ask this council to support that recommendation. That's the end of my presentation. Happy to take any questions from any of the councillors. Thank you.
I think that was quicker than 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks for waiting. Thank you very much. Okay, so that brings an end to questions and public question time and deputations for this evening. So I will go to the CEO for declarations of interest.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I've received one declaration of interest from Councillor Toppelberg in relation to item 5.2 regarding 305 Fitzgerald Street. It is a proximity interest, noting that Councillor Toppelberg's business is located 2 doors away from the subject property. Councillor Toppelberg is not seeking approval to participate in the debate or to remain in chambers or vote on the matter. That's the only declaration received this evening, Mayor Cole.
Thank you, Sarah. I haven't put in a declaration of impartiality because I thought it might be a little bit of a long bow, but I would probably just take this opportunity to seek your advice in relation to the adoption of the property management framework. I have recently joined the North Perth Bowling Club as a social member. There are many social members, and it might be an interest in common, but I'm interested in your view on that.
Through Mayor Cole, might just looking and reading the rest of the chamber about whether or not there are any other members or social members of any of the other clubs or sporting clubs contained in the property management framework.
I'm also a social member of the North Perth Bowls Club, as is Councillor Smith.
Mayor Cole, were there
I'm
any
just
other?
thinking that this covers off all all sporting and clubs. So if we have children involved in clubs, etc., what's the view from the administration in relation to the extent of making those declarations, where we're talking about a framework that
Through Mayor Cole, I think if we could just note impartiality interests for any council members who are members or social members of a club, or maybe their family members.
Okay, well, I'll also make an impartiality interest that my child is a junior member of Floridacina Football Club this season. I just better check just in case there are any others. I have been members of other things, but not anymore. Too busy. Anyone else wish to make a declaration about any association with our sporting and community groups? There's a great big long list in this framework document. I'll give you a bit of a moment to think about it.
Through Mayor Cole, we'll prepare those declarations of interest for the ordinary council meeting next week as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're moving on to the items that have been raised. And just to explain to members of the public gallery, this is our council briefing. We have our council meeting proper next Tuesday, which is our decision-making meeting. And the purpose of this forum is for council members to ask questions of administration on the reports, to seek additional information, potentially to flag amendments or alternate motions. So we're not making any decisions tonight. You're very welcome to stay and listen. What we do is go to the items that were raised by members of the gallery first, because we know you're interested to hear those most. So I'll go through the order in which they were raised. So first of all, we had 5.2, then 7.2. We did have 8.5, but given that we actually have people here for 5.3, I'll go to 5.3 next and then 8.5. So councillors, do you have any questions in relation to item 5.2, which is number 305 Fitzgerald Street, West Perth, change of use from warehouse to recreation private, amendment to approved with unauthorised existing development? Councillor Toppelberg has left the room. Councillor Hallett.
Through the Mayor to the Acting Director, Executive Director, can I just confirm that in deleting condition 2 and increasing the number of clients in condition 3, that there's no limit then on the number of employees, albeit the applicant has stated that there'd only be 2 at a time?
Just to let you know that we do have Jane Naidoo, Manager of Planning and Development, something like that, joining us this evening.
Hello, hope you can hear me. Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. To your question, Councillor Hallett, yes, what you stated is correct, that ultimately the condition would not limit the number of staff that would be on the premises at any one time. It would really relate to the number of patrons only.
The original approval was for hours outside of business hours. Can you provide any commentary on the rationale for that at the time and what's changed in relation to the potential impact on adjacent businesses?
Through Mayor Cole, yes, so there have been previous approvals issued in 2013 and 2014 in relation to this particular use. There were some limitations, including hours of operation. they were between the hours of 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. And then again, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Monday to Friday, and then 7 a.m. to 12 p.m. on Saturday. So there was a presentation made from Alex that made reference to, I guess, how supportive that is, I guess, for a small business. Now, ultimately, those were the hours that were sought for approval at that time. And I guess that was the premise for the approval issued then. The applicant does have the ability now, which they are seeking, to extend those operating hours. Now, in terms of the appropriateness of those operating hours, need to have regard for ultimately the measures that would be in place to mitigate against some of those amenity impacts that you've heard from the adjoining landowners tonight. The applicant is seeking to extend those operating hours, which in my view is quite significant, from 5:30 a.m. start to 8 p.m. Monday to Friday, and then 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday. So in addition to that, and as you referred to before, there is also an increase in the number of patrons. So ultimately, in terms of the intensity of the use, it is increasing across all hours, and those hours are proposed to extend. There needs to be measures in place from administration's perspective to mitigate against some of those amenity impacts that you've heard about. To the rear of the property, as you've heard, is residential, but also along Fitzgerald are also commercial properties, and we do want to support small business, and those adjoining small businesses are also being impacted by virtue of noise and vibration. So I guess ultimately administration's of the view that the use itself is not unreasonable. A gym in a designated commercial area along Fitzgerald Street, a key thoroughfare, is not unreasonable to expect, but there needs to be some measures and controls in place in order to address some of those off-site impacts.
At what point did administration become aware that the business was running outside of the approved hours, and was that intentional, or was it because the owner was unaware of what was approved?
Through you, Mayor Cole, ultimately in terms of compliance, our compliance regime, it's really premised on being reactive and complaints driven. So we did receive complaints from adjoining landowners in regards to noise and vibration, as well as operating hours. So I guess administration was alerted through that, and that was a number of months ago. And since then, I suppose administration's been undertaking compliance investigation, trying to work with the operator, as well as liaising with the adjoining residents. But also the mechanism being this planning application has now been submitted to, I guess, address some of those changes in operation that the applicant's now seeking.
Thank you. This is fine maybe for the briefing notes, if you don't have it to hand. I'm just wondering if we can find out more about what noise attenuation requirements have been required of similar uses in Vincent.
Through Mayor Cole, yes, we can provide that in the briefing notes. I will say that the city does have a sound attenuation policy, and ultimately the premise of that and the objective of that policy is to say that when you're establishing a business, to consider how you can mitigate against some of those off-site impacts, including noise, by virtue of undertaking a noise assessment. So ordinarily, this is something that we would ordinarily request, a noise management plan that would be informed by an acoustic assessment undertaken. It's important to note that the 2013 and 2014 approvals issued by the city did not require any need to undertake a acoustic assessment and to implement its recommendations, and therefore a noise management plan. So that's probably a key point to note, but absolutely we can pull together some commentary for you about some of those attenuation measures elsewhere.
Are you able to comment at all about what a potential condition would look like in relation to permanently closing the roller door and noise attenuation of that?
Through Mayor Cole, we can draft something and include that in the briefing notes. Ultimately, it's an important point that was made from the residents to the rear. I think the residents to the rear are well placed to provide advice around the what they see as that character and of that locality in terms of that interface, because ultimately there is an appreciation, I think, that there can be some commercial uses along Fitzgerald Street, but they are to the rear of that. So in terms of how that activity is direct, like non-residential use or the commercial activity is directed, is really important. And you heard that tonight about the need for that to really be directed towards Fitzgerald Street, because that's where the commercial activity is taking place. That's where the ambient noise from the passing traffic comes from. It is, in our view, unreasonable in terms of having the roller door open, because that activity would be directed towards the residents to the rear. So I understand those concerns. In terms of the applicant's noise management strategy, it does refer to the roller door. If you refer to attachment 3, table 2, however, you will note that it is proposed to be opened for the majority of the operating hours, including 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So aside from saying that it's just going to be open as required, and I quote that, there's no real guidance or supporting commentary about how that would address the noise issue.
Would you be able to comment on the submissions of noise logs that were made by neighbours of the gym that were provided to the city, and what happened to those?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I can give you a brief summary. We can provide a little bit more detail in the briefing notes to yourselves, elected members. But ultimately, you've heard tonight that there have been a number of complaints stemming back from our records to 2013. So ultimately, since the original approval was issued for the use, and throughout the course of 7 years, there have been ongoing concerns around noise. In terms of the city's approach to responding to noise concerns, ordinarily a log would be issued to the complainant for them to record over a course of, I think it's 14 days, some of the instances when they would be receiving that unreasonable level of noise, and then the city would then investigate that. Now, our records show that there have been instances when those logs have not been returned to the city, but then there have been other instances where that's been investigated further and they were completed. So over the course of 7 years, I guess there have been logs that have been completed, and we've been able to investigate those concerns further, but then there have also been instances where the logs have not been returned. We can provide a little bit more detail in the briefing notes.
Are you able to also provide some more information about the proposed 40mm mats and how they might differ from other forms of padding, such as crash pads that advanced weightlifting venues might use?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, we can try to provide some advice from that regard. I guess that goes to the heart of potentially the differing views between the applicant and administration, in that there have been a number of mitigation measures put forward by the applicant, but they haven't been verified. And though we can provide you some advice, I guess that may be best placed to be provided by an expert in noise and vibration. I guess therein lies the issue. That's what we're seeking to achieve through the conditions, that be verified to be appropriate. But look, we can do a desktop investigation and provide you some advice.
Thank you. And there was just a comment about 90% of the community submissions being in support of the application. I mean, they were out 100 metres outside of the location. I just wanted to find out a bit more about the consultation process, and how would those folks have been notified about the opportunity to give feedback, and would that have been administration?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. So on, I think it is page 5 of the replacement item that was circulated earlier this afternoon. In that item, it talks to the consultation method, which was, it was advertised for a period of 14 days in September, and it was, notice was provided to 14 owners and occupiers adjoining a subject site. So that's consistent with the city's consultation policy. In terms of how the city received 93 letters of support, I would suspect that the applicant has also been liaising or notifying perhaps some of their patrons, but that's at a guess.
Thank you, Councillor Howlett, and Manager for Development and Design. Going over to Councillor Wallace now.
Thank you, Nicole. There was a comment from the public gallery that we'd maybe undertaken a noise assessment, or the city had maybe undertaken a noise assessment. Is that something that was done?
Through you, Mayor Cole, as part of our investigation, we did take some noise readings from the adjoining premises. You heard one of the presenters tonight, Richard, refer to that. Ultimately, it has previously been used as an office, that particular premises next door. However, there's been a period of time, I guess, post or during COVID, that it was being used as a residential premises, so ultimately a single house. And during that time, there were a number of complaints received. The city, in response to some of those complaints, undertook some noise readings, and it was identified that the noise received from that premises did exceed the noise levels that would be permitted for a residential property, not a commercial property, but a residential property. So that was the noise assessment that was undertaken.
So the noise was above what was acceptable to be received at a residential property, or acceptable to be emitted from a residential property?
Through you, Mayor Cole, to clarify, it's to be received. So it's the noise received from that adjoining premises that at the time was being used as a residential property. It was in the order of 12 decibels that it exceeded it. So I'm not a noise expert, but that is substantial.
Does the discontinuation of the use of that lot as a residential lot affect the prescribed noise level significantly?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, the noise levels for premises receiving the noise change dependent on the land use, so commercial versus residential. Now, that property isn't, as I understand it, is not currently being used as a residential property. I believe it's being used as an office or a non-residential use. So again, the commercial standards for noise receiving levels apply for that premises for the time being.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that they're kind of calculated as a percentage of residential lots within a surrounding radius, but I'm not sure. Maybe we can get some more information in the briefing notes. My next question was just about vibration. So we heard the noise regulations, which set prescribed limits for noise. Is there a relevant or similar regulation regarding vibration and like nuisance vibration in particular?
Through you, Mayor Cole, as I understand it, vibration is also captured under the noise regulations and based on the conditions that administration is recommending, which is for the noise management plan to be reviewed and recommendations to be confirmed by an appropriate, acoustic consultant. They would be able to not only deal with noise, but also with the vibration element.
Is there an enforceable limit on vibration, or is there just an enforceable limit on noise?
Through you, Mayor Cole, vibration is a little bit more challenging. It's probably not as common, I would say, as noise in terms of the complaints that the city receives and such. I can provide you more advice in respect to the regulations and a little bit more around standards and what is appropriate. But ultimately, that is the intention is to capture not only the vibrations, but as well as the noise element.
Just through you, Mayor Cole, just to add to what the manager is saying,
the assigned levels in the noise regs relate to noise. So vibration is a bit more technical to measure. It can only be done by the Department of Water and Environmental Resources. So we would work with them to monitor that, but the city so far has only monitored actual noise levels.
Thank you.
Councillors, Councillor Fotakis.
I've had all my questions answered, but I just did want to alert the manager just to the numbering on the replacement item, just to have that corrected prior to next week.
Yes, it appears there are a few missing in between. Yep, thank you, Councillor Fotakis. Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Through you to the Manager of Development Design. Am I close? Yes. Just in relation to the amended item and the conditions, item 8.3 talks about within 42 days of the issuing of an approval, an amended noise management plan is to be provided that provides mitigation measures and incorporates any additional measures and has a procedure. Is there should that noise management plan that is then based on based on the views of a consultant, I guess, incorporate works to the building as a key requirement to mitigate noise and vibration? There doesn't appear to be anything within the proposed conditions that talk about a time frame for those works to be undertaken or implemented. Condition 8.4 does say that the use of the premises shall be carried out in accordance with the amended NMP. So from that, I would assume that from 42 days of the issue of the approval, when the amended NMP is provided to the city, from that moment forth, the use of the premises shall be carried out in accordance with that approval. Do you feel, am I interpreting that in line with the way that you would interpret it? And I guess my other question is in relation to physical works, how the city would get an understanding that those works, if required, had been implemented.
Yes, through Mayor Cole. I do understand what you're referring to in terms of 8.3. Ultimately, my comment would be that there's a number of aspects that need to be covered off in that noise management plan, or amended noise management plan, should I say. Two of those do not require any, approval from the city, because ultimately it's the consultant that would be informing that. So there's no discretion really from that perspective. It's really around 8.3C, which is the procedure for dealing with complaints and breaches, and a city's administration would be best placed to confirm the appropriateness of that procedure or that manual. So I understand that there would need to be a judgment made in terms of the city's satisfaction, in terms of the wording for 8.3C. So if they were to submit something on the within the 42 days, there would need to be a time frame to still, I suppose, review that procedure relating to 8.3C. So there probably needs to be a little bit more consideration from administration around how we could factor that in, so that 8.4 may be a little bit more clearer in terms of when it actually applies, the amended noise management plan. So I appreciate those queries, and maybe we'll provide you a little bit more details in the briefing notes, or an update.
I think you've got my gist there. So I'm going to ask my next question. My next question is, we have seen applications for change of hours for the commercial and residential interface in the past, and on at least some of those occasions we've actually had the noise and acoustic report provided up front. And just wondering, in terms of the city's view around, because I think one of the options that provides council with is to incorporate conditions of approval that specifically reference the key elements of such an acoustic report. And I'm just wondering in relation to, I guess, potential deferral or options in relation to refusal, because we haven't actually received that information and it cannot at this stage form part of our decision making. I'd appreciate your views.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. That's a really valid question to be asking at this point. I must say, up until this point in working and liaising with the applicant, we've requested and strongly recommended that some sort of noise assessment or be undertaken to better inform, I guess, the appropriateness of the noise management plan and the measures that are being proposed as part of the application. The applicant has been not willing to or not prepared to provide that upfront. So ultimately, the city needs to consider an application before it, which is for an amendment to an existing use, which is important. So it's about whether we would be satisfied with the ability to consider those elements post the planning approval by virtue of a planning condition. Administrations of the view that the same outcome in terms of ultimately getting expert advice from an acoustic consultant verifying that measures incorporated would ensure that the noise limits would be met, that could be satisfied by virtue of a condition. If that was to be required or requested by council upfront, then that's available to you. But I suppose my response would be that I don't see why something similar couldn't be done through a planning condition as proposed.
I guess it depends on the wording of the conditions before us, but I probably would be grateful for the opportunity to consider putting together some words around refusal should the council feel that the application was not supportable without the specific input that would come from a consultant in relation to noise management, in relation to the impact on the surrounding residential and commercial uses of noise and vibration.
Yes, that we can arrange for that through the briefing notes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to welcome Councillor Smith to the meeting. Lovely to see you, and go to Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Look, it's really just a follow-on question from some of the previous ones. I'm just looking for some clarity as to how planning conditions deal with the situation we have here where there's an interface with both residential and commercial. Is the business required to meet the standards, the lower standards, or is it simply about the measurement at the different type of premises, and how would you see the noise management plan actually addressing that? Would it be through conditions on the roller door or some other measure?
Through you, Mayor Cole, it's the latter, which is ultimately in terms of the noise received, it's based on the nature of that premises. So if you're an adjoining business and it's commercial, then it's the noise limits for a commercial property compared to the rear of this premises, which is residential, then it's a residential standard in terms of the noise emissions. In terms of how you address that from a planning perspective and dealing with this interface, that's really challenging, but it's quite common in our inner city setting where you basically do have these activity corridors that back onto residential. It's really in close proximity. You heard that from one of the residents tonight. Peter was referring to the narrowness of that street. But ultimately it comes down to, from my perspective, really balancing between the appropriateness of the use, but also the activities and how it is being managed, which really is the crux of this. How is the premises being managed? Because we've heard tonight that at times when there have been complaints and there's been investigation, there's sometimes a relief, or the premises doesn't create off-site impacts for a period of time, but then other times, perhaps not managed under the same scrutiny, there are those issues being experienced. So what we haven't had in the past, though, with this particular property is, and as I mentioned before, planning approvals that basically specify the need to have a noise management plan and have those operational details in place so that the operator is bound by those terms. We haven't had that so far. So it's really been a reactive approach from administration to just manage those impacts as they arise. This is really the opportunity, I guess, to get some of those measures in place. So what you could reasonably expect from an adjoining commercial business is probably different to what you would reasonably expect as a residential property to the rear. So I guess in terms of the roller door comment that you made, yes, there can be limitations around that. Administration's approach has been basically the applicant's noise management plan as put forward needs to be verified by an acoustic consultant. And if it's not appropriate to mitigate against the impacts of noise, then they would be making recommendations through a report, and those recommendations need to be embedded into an amended noise management plan, and that is what is to be to guide the operation of that premises.
Thank you. And that really leads into my next question, as you were just mentioning. If this particular application was to be refused, or if it was approved but the noise management plan was not to the satisfaction of the city, would we be left with a situation where, short of enforcing operating hours and managing noise complaints, we would have no other avenues?
Through you, Mayor Cole, sorry, I missed a part of that. Were you suggesting that what would be the impact of including the term to the city's, to the city's satisfaction?
The question I'm asking is if either this application is refused or it's approved, but the requirement of a satisfactory noise management plan is not met, what is left is the current approval, which does not have any noise management plan included or any other mechanisms to manage noise levels other than our regulatory options and the currently approved hours. I'm just confirming that's correct.
Through you, Mayor Cole, that's exactly right, yes.
Councillors? You're doing brilliantly there, Manager. I just wanted to ask a couple of follow-up questions just to clarify. Have noise measurements been taken from the Eden Street residence homes, I should say?
Through you, Mayor Cole, perhaps I'll take that on notice. I don't believe they have. We have been in consultation with some of those residents, but I will confirm in the briefing notes for you.
Okay. Well, I think if the briefing notes could include a little bit more information about the complaints, the nature of complaints, what's been found through those complaints, that would be very welcome. In relation to the garage door being open or closed, I'm just wondering what would be the impact of having that required to be closed during gym sessions? Is that roller door open for ventilation or for access only? I'm just wondering if you could provide any information about the need for the door to be open.
Yes, Mayor Cole. Stemming from tonight, perhaps we will liaise closely with the applicant to better understand that. As I mentioned previously in the noise management plan, in relation to the roller door, it just simply says open as required. So it doesn't really elaborate on the intention, whether it's for ventilation or whether it's to have some activity spill outside of that, the indoor space into that car parking area and adjoining that area. So perhaps we'll get some advice from the applicant and let you know.
Well, that's an interesting point you raised, Manager. Does the planning approval extend to gym activities in the car parking area?
Mayor Cole, there is no reference to activities occurring in that car park area. You've got a floor plan that has also been included as an attachment, and that doesn't indicate any intention to use that outdoor space for fitness purposes.
Okay. And in relation to mats, it was raised by a member of the public gallery this evening about whether there are industry standards in this type of intense physical activity and weight bearing, whether there is a standard for density and thickness of mats. I'm not sure if that's something that planning extends to, but if there's any information that on that becomes available, that would be interesting.
Yes, we'll look into it and see if we can provide something in the briefing notes, Mayor Cole.
Thank you. Are there any further questions on this item? Okay, I think we've been quite exhaustive. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item that was raised, which was item 7.2, and that is the adoption of the property management framework. Questions, council members? Councillor Hallett.
Through the mayor to the non-acting executive director. At what point were groups and people affected by this item notified of tonight's agenda?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I would agree with Mr. Gardam that there was an email that went out 10:30 Monday, but I also would note that there's been a number of ongoing conversations with groups leading up to that time as well. So there's been different forms of communication, but I agree that email went out 10:30 Monday.
Would you be able to just run through the rationale, not in too much detail perhaps, but of the GRV methodology which results in the play group in Highgate being charged 3 times out of the one in Mount Hawthorn?
Yeah, so the proposal that's been put forward is that we use GRV as probably the best independent metric that we can use as to the value of the facility that is being leased. And it's an independent metric that's provided to us by Landgate and uses a sort of a well-known methodology to assess the value of the rental value of that particular property. So we felt that it was a good independent metric, and then by applying a 10% loading to that, we then got the ability to moderate that back to what we think is actually a reasonable rental value for a community group. And then in addition to that, again, we then apply a community benefit subsidy of either 25% or 50%, particularly for those sports groups and clubs in the category 1 and 2. So I suppose that starting point of the GRV, we felt, we looked at other options, but we felt that that was the best independent metric that used a common methodology across all of these very variable sites and facilities, and the best place to start.
In relation to the community submission on Forest Park, it mentioned about it being held in trust for recreational purposes, and the GRV could be contestable. Mm-hmm. Does administration intend on challenging this, or is there an alternative mechanism that can take that into account?
I'll take that question on notice if I could.
In the table in attachment 9, financial implications for groups, it applies the 25% subsidy to all of the groups. Do we have the Club Health Check data to warrant that, or are there some that may not actually meet the requirements to receive a 25% subsidy?
So the category 1 tenants will apply 50% subsidy, and I think all of those will receive the full 50%. Category 2, it's a 25% subsidy, and the majority of those will receive the full 25% subsidy.
In admin's comments responding to some of the community feedback, it stated that the framework is a guide for negotiations. And then there's also a diagram in attachment 9 that implies discussion can occur beyond the framework. I'd just like to clarify what that means in relation to the specific lease amounts that have been noted for the existing clubs.
It's our intention to use the framework as best we can to apply to the majority of cases. But we recognise that we are going through a transition process where we've got a disparate set of organisations and conditions, and we're now trying to move everyone across into a consistent approach. So I would suggest that the property management framework would apply in all but rare circumstances. And what we're flagging there is that if we do come across a situation where we believe there needs to be an exemption, then we can consider that and put that to council for consideration.
Councillors? Councillor Gontaszewski?
Thank you. Just in relation to where the GRV calculations has thrown up a few interesting differences. I actually couldn't find any really readily available information on the methodology around GRV calculation on the Landgate site. When I looked, and it was fairly superficial, it just talked about that it uses evidence. And so, but it didn't sort of drill down into what that was. So if you have any information available on that, that would be really great.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, I'll include that in the report. I think that would probably be of interest to everyone.
Thank you, yes. The other question I had was in relation to a recent commercial lease that we looked at on land that was set aside for public open space. This is the Vincent Street premises on, no, not Vincent. Hold on, I'm in the report. It's the Royal Park Bethany lease. The lease there, the lease fee there was $1,500 per annum, which included $500 to cover reticulation, lawn and garden maintenance costs for the premises. I believe that was on the basis of a commercial valuation, and just wanted to check in terms of whether that commercial valuation, let me have a look. Whether the commercial valuation considered the limitations in on the use or the scope of uses that could be accommodated on the facility, and how that played out in the lease fee that was eventually agreed.
Through you, Mayor Cole. Yes, that's correct. So it was a market rent valuation, which obviously takes into account the use, the current use of the tenant, in that case, like a Living Well Centre or aged daycare, which are highly subsidised from what I understand, and therefore the valuation we got back was $1,000 per annum. We just added on the previous $500 for the reticulation and other items that were already under the original lease agreement.
Are we aware of any, in terms of the, for example, floor area of the premises and surrounding land area that would be included in the lease, is it possible to get an understanding of the comparison between Forest Park club rooms in this instance? Just, I guess, it's just an interesting different methodology that has potentially come up with a lower rate for a commercial provider in this instance.
Through you, Mayor Cole. Yeah, it's an unusual comparison. I don't know. I think we'd have to. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, that's fine. Just wondering, in terms of the condition of the buildings, I believe that there's some is there an intention, and if I've missed it in the report, my apologies, to before recommencing leases, to understand the current condition of the buildings, and also whether the city has the intention and or capacity to address the sorts of issues that we would be taking on under the proposed framework within the lease term?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, when I met with Mr. Gartner, he presented some really compelling arguments with regards to that. So we do have properties that are of different levels of condition, and initially we were actually requesting some of our category 1 and 2 tenants to take on responsibility for capital upgrades and things like painting inside and out. And so what we have done is reverted more to what I would term similar to a residential tenancy, if you like, where the tenant is responsible for keeping the property neat and tidy and to make sure that any wear and tear is repaired. But capital changes are the responsibility of the city. Our intention is that we would do a property inspection at the beginning of the tenancy, and then if there's anything that particularly needs to be repaired or noted, the city can include that in its maintenance schedules, and we would, obviously take care of that. So, but we would have those terms agreed up front as part of the lease arrangement.
Okay, so potentially when signing off a lease, there would be those maintenance items that the city was agreeing to take on that would be part of that lease. Like, so if something was coming to council, we would see that list.
I believe that we would be able to include that as part of the lease for council's consideration.
And just in terms of the conditions around approval of leases, can you just advise, out of all the current leases that are, or out of the current facilities, which of those would potentially be coming to council for approval, and which of those would be going through the CEO under the proposed conditions around authority to approve?
Look, I'll take that one on notice and just confirm I've got that correct.
And I guess I just wanted to clarify in terms of the additional costs that the city would be taking on under the proposed new framework versus what we've seen previously versus the current status quo. If you have, I don't necessarily need it for every single building, but a selection would be useful if you have that information.
I saw a summary this afternoon which included sort of a before and after, and I think the city's expenses for the total of category 1s and 2s, it increases by about $3,000 a year. But we've also got about a 4-year migration path to get to that point at the minimum. So so we're talking in a couple of $1,000s in terms of our expenses.
But does that include the additional capital works that we would be taking on in terms of the reduced lease obligations on the tenants, their fair wear and tear, and that we would be taking on both structural but also, I guess, the renewal and upgrade?
Our, through you, Mayor Call, apologise. Our assessment is that for the majority of the more expensive capital changes, the city has already been bearing the cost of those. So we're not seeing a major incremental shift in expenditure for the city by the implementation of this framework.
And I guess just over and above, one of the objectives of this, of implementing a property framework, was to provide a level of consistency and transparency in terms of, from administration's perspective, in actually having to then operationalise these leases. Are you satisfied that the property management framework, that we're at that point where you, the administration can take this document and it would be useful from that perspective?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I definitely believe that this is going to be a much improved situation from our ability to administer these leases and to provide some consistency for our tenants. So certainly the administration of it becomes much easier.
Thank you, councillors. I just have a few questions. One of the issues that came up from the public question time today was council wanting to ensure that any new requests came to council. So I see that condition 4.2 satisfies that, so that we're delegating only to the Chief Executive Officer where the group is currently occupying a city building in accordance with the property management framework. So I assume that would also be that the terms of the lease and the number of extensions that would be possible. Is that correct?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole. Oh, sorry, through you, Mayor Cole. Mayor Cole, yes, I agree. That's how I see it.
Okay.
There was an earlier question about confirming which of those are going to be managed by delegation. So I'll go away and just really clarify that and make sure it's very clear.
If you're happy to relook at the wording, that would be
Certainly.
appreciated.
Yep.
I also just wanted to ask about Robertson Park Artist Studio. They did provide some feedback where they were concerned about being treated as a commercial tenant. So I just wanted to ask what their terms, leasing terms and obligations are now versus what they're likely to be as a Category 3 tenant. So in terms of obligations, costs and leasing fees.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Cole. I'll come back with the detail on that one.
Thank you. And I also just wanted to talk about, or not talk, ask questions about the situation we have with GRV where we do have some outliers. So for example, in Category 1, high grade play group is clearly the outlier in comparison to the other play groups. I am considering putting forward an amendment, so I'll flag it, but also seek administration's feedback on this during the week. If we were to put a cap on play groups to be $500 CPI indexed and a cap on Category 1 overall of $1,000 CPI indexed, I'd welcome feedback on that. And in relation to Category 2 groups, I just really wanted to ask some questions about tennis, given that they are like for like and there is some disparity there. If I know this is obviously GRV based, but how does that align in relation to the number of courts and the extent and condition of the facilities when you compare Leederville, North Perth and Lowton? Given that we also have the outlier in Forest Park Croquet Club with an addition of 4,500, also considering whether we need to put a cap on Category 2 tenants at this stage, considering $4,000 overall cap to ensure that we don't have such outlying variations in our Category 1 and 2 tenants. So that's flagging an amendment, also seeking some advice on that through the week before I formalise that.
Yeah, Mayor Cole, the only response I'd make at the moment is that further to some questions I received during the day, for Category 1, because a number of the tenants there are currently paying outgoings and then the city is now taking those over, the majority of, in fact, all of the Category 1 tenants actually come out ahead. So they actually receive a better financial benefit than they have at the moment, regardless of the GRV issue. In terms of how GRV impacts on the different facilities, I think we can provide some further support for that.
Okay, thank you. I did receive that advice today, and it still does leave that disparity between the play groups, although they are all better off, and I note that. I guess it's also potentially a mechanism to stop major fluctuations in GRV. That's another consideration for me putting forward that potential amendment. Are there any further questions or not comments, sorry, save that for next week. Any further questions on the property management framework? No? Okay, thank you. We shall move on to the next item raised during public question time, which was it was 8.5, but given that we have people waiting here for 5.3, we'll go to that first. So 5.3 is number 103 to 105 Summer Street, Perth, proposed childcare premises. This is an amendment to approved. Are there any questions? There are no questions. Thank you for coming. Okay, so we'll now go to 8.5, updated project plans for 5 strategic projects in the corporate business plan 2020-21 to 2023-24. Questions, please. Councillor Hallett.
Just one through you, Mayor. In the community engagement framework plan, there's no budget allocation included, but I believe a consultant has been engaged to assist with this and just wondering about that.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we have put the budget figures at the moment to not include quarterly budget review, as this has not been endorsed. But following that, we can update the project on a page.
Councillors. Councillor Gontaszewski.
I take it that that's the approach for all of the others that are in the budget review. I guess from a procedural perspective, she says, crafting a question, one would wonder if the approved project plan would inform the budget review rather than vice versa. But take that one on notice, I guess. My question in relation to this is that there are a number of items that I believe are CEO KPIs for this performance period that are still finalising outside of the performance management period. I'm just wondering if the CEO has any comments in relation to that.
Through you, Mayor Cole, the ability to finalise these would probably depend on the extent of community engagement during some of the strategy and plan updates. So if it was a much shorter consultation period, then that would probably mean the projects could be achieved during this financial year.
Okay. In relation to the Britannia West Development Plan, I note the comments submitted via email and read out from the community member, which was also in line with my question in relation to milestones around community consultation. What timeline is being considered for that?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we would be looking to do community consultation in early 2021.
Okay, just let me get to the plan. Okay, so currently though there is an item 6, I believe, talks about concept plan and detailed design, and that is and that takes 4 months. Is the community engagement considered to be part of that phase of the project?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, it is.
And where it says, I guess it would be useful from a consideration point of view to have an understanding of when it is intended that this item would come to a council and when it is intended that community engagement would occur. Is it possible to amend that so that that additional detail is provided under item 6?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, we can provide that additional information. At the moment, we are planning to come to council workshop in January and then finalise the concept plan for community consultation following this.
And would that be coming to a council meeting for sending out for advertising and engagement?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we would come to workshop in January. Any feedback from that would go into the concept plan and then we would come to council meeting for approval to advertise.
Sorry, and here we go.
Councillor Gontaszewski, before you move on from that, could I just jump in and say, would it be possible to have those details added into the project on a page just to clarify when consultation will happen and when the decision-making point is for council?
To you, Mayor Cole, absolutely.
Thank you.
Just a question on the item relating to the preparation of the marketing plan. On page 2 of the document, there's $100,000 per year over 4 years, and just wondering what costs are covered under that and whether that is in relation to implementation rather than development of the plan.
I would expect that that's to do with implementation rather than the development of the plan. We would expect the plan to be substantively done in 2020. Thanks, Mayor Cole.
It would be useful if the project document just contained the project tasks rather than the implementation, if the intent of the implementation is going to be driven, or the scope of the implementation would be driven by the plan itself. Don't you think, is my question. But anyway, just for consideration. But in terms of the Beatty Park 2062 project, I understand that there is at this stage a lack of detail that can be incorporated into the project on a page because of where things are at. It has, there's no community consultation milestone, and wondering if that is something that is considered to be part of the forward plan, and whether it is intended that this project on a page would be included in the December meeting papers with the report so that they can perhaps align better than they do currently.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we have a project steering committee on Friday. Pending the outcome of this, we could include more details, but yes, community consultation is included in the next steps, but when that is will be pending that meeting.
On the Leederville Activity Centre plan, again, noting that the delivery goes beyond into the 21-22 financial year, just querying what is considered would be able to be some options if council wanted to ensure that that was finalised and sent off to Planning Commission within this financial year.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll take that one on notice.
Thank you, appreciate that. And just a general question on exception reporting against these projects if the milestones are not able to be met. CEO, do you have any commentary in relation to how that would be managed?
Through Mayor Cole, we'll be providing quarterly updates on how all these projects are tracking, but these particular projects will provide more regular updates through council workshops by tabling these and noting whether there have been any changes or unplanned or unforeseen impacts on the timeframes.
That's very useful to have a regular program of updates. I'm just wondering in terms of if this is council is being asked to approve the milestones and scope and cost, if there is a change to those, what is the approval process for that? And who is the authority that would be undertaking that approval process?
Through Mayor Cole, if there's a planned change to the scope, the budget or the timeframe, then we'll come to council for approval for that. There might be an unplanned change or delay which is outside of a control for whatever reason, that would then just need to report to council what that unplanned change was.
Is it common that planned and unplanned changes in project management have different approval processes, or is it more likely that all variances above a particular threshold require approval and consideration by the approving authority?
Through Mayor Cole, by unplanned, I mean by an external party outside of the City of Vincent, like a stakeholder or another approval body that then we would need to report what those changes are to council.
Yeah, so recognising that dependencies can be critical in ensuring like external dependencies, and sometimes internal dependencies can be critically impactful on project milestones being achieved and therefore having subsequent flow-on effects on cost. Is it the intention that any change to project milestones, key milestones in these project reports would be require approval, or is that something that if we wanted to ensure that we would have to specify that in a condition associated in the recommendation?
Through you, Mayor Cole, our approach would be that if there's any significant change, there would have to be some judgment about what would constitute a significant change, but a significant variance to the budget, the scope or the timeframes, then we'd come back to council for consideration of that.
And does the city's project management framework specify for staff so that there's clarity around what those tolerances are in relation to projects of different sizes and scopes?
Through Mayor Cole, the framework does specify different levels of project management for the size and scope, but that's adjusted for the project. We haven't defined what that tolerance would be for a significant change. But for instance, for a major project, if it's a 2-year project, if there was, say, a 3-month delay, we'd consider that a major variance.
Nothing further.
Councillors? I'll just have the question that I think this is the third time I've asked it. Could we please have alignment between the delivery dates on items where the KPIs for this year have already been agreed? And I think, for example, with the community engagement framework, that would include just shifting back 1 month to align the council decision-making point to meet the CO KPI on that particular project.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, we can make that adjustment.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay. That concludes questions raised by members of the public gallery. So we'll go back to the front of the agenda and move through sequentially the items that we haven't already asked questions on. So that takes us to item 5.1, 67 Mary Street, Highgate, single house. And Councillor Hallett.
Through you to either the manager or acting executive director. The report notes that the development hadn't provided a life cycle assessment and didn't address the relevant local housing objective of the built form policy. Could you explain how the process of assessment differs for city officers for an application that does provide these versus one that does not?
I'll take that question. Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. Ultimately, there is a need to demonstrate compliance with those local housing objectives of our built form policy. There's a number of them. One of them requires demonstration that environmental considerations have been completed through submitting a life cycle assessment. It's still an objective. So ultimately, administration has undertaken an assessment against the objectives in its entirety. Now, that is one objective. On page 19 of the agenda, there's 3/4 of a page of the discussion around how administration's of the view that ultimately those objectives have been satisfied, because that one sole objective forms part of a broader consideration around environmental sustainability. So on balance, administration has requested that life cycle assessment. It wasn't forthcoming. Justification was provided around environmental sustainability in general, and that's what the assessment has been based on. And on balance, it's considered that the principles of environmentally sustainable design has been satisfied.
Thank you. Were the revised plans produced by the applicant distributed to those who'd made submissions objecting to the original application?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I might take that one on notice and advise you in the briefing notes.
Thank you. And just last one, there was some communication from a community member in relation to applying streetscape requirements to the back of developments where it backs on no right of way and the relationship with the built form policy. Are you able to comment at all on that?
Sure, yes, through you, Mayor Cole. In administration's response to public questions taken on notice, it was published in the October minutes. There was response around how the garage width provisions apply that really apply to this particular proposal. Ultimately, there's a limitation on the garage width, and it doesn't exclude developments that front or have a frontage to a right of way. And that was the intention of administration's response. So basically the built form policy says that you need to limit your garage width so it doesn't dominate the streetscape, but that is silent in terms of not applying to rights of way. So in the assessment of this particular proposal, where it has frontage to Mary Street, but also has a frontage to the rear, to the right of way, an assessment was considered against the design principles because the garage basically occupies the entirety of the rear lot width. and it was considered that it was appropriate. So design principles assessment is required because that provision applies to all developments, irrespective of whether it backs onto a right-of-way. But in considering the streetscape and the development form, it's considered appropriate against the design principles.
Thank you for clarifying that. Questions, council members? Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Meko. So just to follow up on that, if there's a right-of-way behind your lot, you're considered to have 2 street frontages to the primary street and additional frontage to the right-of-way for this garage width provision to apply?
Through you, Mayor Cole, if you have, so ultimately you would have a frontage to a primary street and you would have a frontage to a right-of-way to the rear. And basically the policy framework sets out that where you do have alternate access, such as access from a right-of-way, that's where you should get your vehicle access from, so as to not to impact on the streetscape. I just wanted to flag that it's a bit tricky sometimes as well, because we do have these circumstances where basically you've got rights of way that ultimately historically have been used purely for getting vehicle access. So it's dominated by garage doors, but what you do see is with redevelopments and infill, that these areas actually transitioning. And it's a real opportunity as per our built form policy to really look at the appropriateness of that built form to not only provide like garage and vehicle access, but also to provide some level of surveillance and articulation to the actual built form to improve that streetscape outcome. So it's a real opportunity through the built form policy to do that.
Councillors, I just have a general question, Manager. Through the DRP process, and I understand revised plans were provided, but I just wanted to ask whether you're satisfied with the bulk scale and massing that's been addressed, and I'm particularly interested in your views on the boundary walls.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, administration is satisfied. Ultimately, the plans that were initially submitted proposed to the extent of 3-storey boundary walls towards the rear of the site. So it's important to note that this site actually is undulating and it slopes down significantly 3.6 metres from the front to the rear of the site. So to manage that, the applicant has initially proposed a built form outcome where it's 3 stories towards the rear component. Ultimately, in light of DRP comments and submissions received around bulk and scale and the appropriateness of that in this context, the applicant sought to reduce that down to 2 stories. So ultimately, there has been a modification made, and the proposal on balance, given the site context, is considered to be appropriate in terms of bulk and scale. I think it's important to note as well towards, if you look along this laneway, there's a urban design study that's been provided. It's quite common to have 2- and 3-storey developments to the rear along this laneway. So it's not inconsistent with the existing streetscape.
Thank you, Manager. Any further questions on this item? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 5.4, number 2, Deeg Court, North Perth, 2 group dwellings. This is returned from last month's deferral. Are there any questions on this item? Councillor Gontaszewski.
No question from me, but just if administration would be amenable to preparing or updating the alternate motion that they prepared for last month in light of the changes to the design that had been made in the interim.
So a request for an alternate motion for approval has come through. Thank you.
Yes, we can prepare that, and perhaps we can provide some of those draft conditions in the briefing notes.
Okay. And just to give you the opportunity, Manager, you have not been swayed, I see, by the changes that have been made. Is the main concern the street setback?
Through you, Mayor Cole, Yes, ultimately, administration's recommendation remains the same, and more specifically, reasons for refusal are ultimately on the same basis. The street setback is still an issue. In reviewing the extent of the changes that have been made, I think from a colours and materials perspective, and if you go back to council's deferral reasons, which is on page 131 of the agenda, it set out that you're seeking to revisit the separation of balconies and perhaps the impact of the building mass. Now, admittedly, I think the applicant's gone some way in addressing the colours and the treatment and materials and such. I think it is an improvement. And more specifically to council's deferral reasons, there is demonstrated a separation of the balconies. There is that spacing and that articulation. And I think the colours and materials as a whole better, I guess, makes a distinction between the upper and ground floors, and as well as between the two units. That said, that only goes so far because ultimately the street setback has not been modified to the extent where it is significantly addresses that issue. So though the treatment and materials and the built form has improved, ultimately it's still impactful by virtue of being approximately, half the setback than that required, and the upper floor overhang is still impactful as well to the streetscape. So for those reasons, administration maintains its reasons for refusal.
Thank you. And just an inquiry about the portrait windows on the upper floor between the two balconies. I'm just a bit confused. Are they louvers, or is that some kind of dark privacy type screening across the windows? It looks a bit heavy in the elevation, but I'm just wondering whether they're actually just louvers and it is all transparent glass.
Through you, Mayor Cole, my understanding is that they are louvers, but perhaps I will just confirm that in the briefing notes.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions on Dean Court? Okay. The next item is 5.5, Place Plan Minor Annual Review. Questions? Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. In relation to the North Perth Place Plan, there's an additional year that's been added for the activity upgrades to Fitzgerald Street. Can I just confirm whether the plans for this have been completed and it's just the implementation that's been put off, perhaps due to COVID, or if the planning itself has also been pushed out?
Mayor Cole, apologies, was that the intersection improvements under 2.1?
I thought you were just really enjoying the show. Sorry if there was a miscommunication. Yeah, we've taken all questions on your item this evening, and you're welcome back next week for the decision making.
.3 under improving this town centre accessibility. Page 19.
Through you, Mayor Cole, apologies. Yes, so this is to do additional implementation. So the planter boxes that were installed last month was the first step of that, but we will continue to implement that additional upgrades throughout these years.
Thank you. And in relation to the Matt Hawthorne Place Plan, there's an activity for investigating lighting improvements in Flinders Street car park that's been marked as completed. I'm just wondering if this has also been implemented, and if not, is there a way that we can align investigations and their implementations?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the improvements are scheduled to be complete in this financial year, to include supply and install of LED to the existing light fitting, single solar lights with a new pole, and solar lights with a new pole.
Any further questions? I'll go to Councillor Wallace and then I'll come to you, Councillor Gontaszewski, moving around the table.
Sorry, Councillor Gontaszewski. Thanks, Michael. It was just a quick one. The North Perth Town Centre implementation plan had the investigation of the cost and benefits of undergrounding power in Vincent Town Centres. It's completing in 1920. Has that been done and what were the results of it? Apologies if I've missed it.
Through you, Mayor Cole, it has been done. I can get you more details on the findings through the briefing notes.
Go ahead.
This, I think, follows on from Councillor Hallett's questions around extending some of the items. With relation to the Woodville Reserve Master Plan and the View Street concept or the design study for the View Street car park, I note that they've had red X's to extend them. Through you, Mayor Cole, to the manager, is that the intention that both of those projects will be completed this financial year and then the implementation is going? Could I just get a status update on those? I'm just trying to separate out. Councillor Hallett wants to align project and implementation and I want to separate them out so I can understand them.
Through you, Mayor Cole, these will not be completed this financial year. The View Street car park urban design concept, it has been delayed to understand more about the North Perth Common, and for those kind of findings, we're going to be doing some data collection throughout the North Perth Common space throughout the summer to understand how that space is acting. And so we'll use that data and more of a review of the entire space to inform the View Street car park urban design concept. And with the Woodville Reserve Master Plan, we're looking to have the sport and recreation facilities plan inform the finalisation of that plan.
Thank you.
Councillors. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Just regarding in the Mount Hawthorn Town Centre place plan, the 1.2 installation of banner poles along Oxford Street North. I was under the impression that that the banner poles that we weren't using them anymore. I don't know if I am correct in that they were, we were going to a different option for sustainability on banners that we were flying across am I making something up here?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we plan to continue the banner poles along Oxford Street. I'll take any other advice if people would not like us to proceed with that.
No, I was just trying to confirm if I thought that we had different plans, so that's fine. I just needed to confirm that. Thank you. And also just with the identifying barriers for inhibiting the nighttime economy, is there any reason why we've cancelled out for 2021?
We're amending that timing to, through you, Mayor Cole, we're amending that timing to align with the Vincent Rebound Plan implementation. We've commenced some discussions with businesses to identify the barriers and determine those opportunities. And we've got some initial findings, but we want to align with the timing that we've outlined in the Rebound Plan.
Thank you.
Councillors, a few questions. I just wanted to find out, if possible, I'm happy for this to be taken on notice, where the plans refer to investigating underground power in town centres. I just wondered to what extent and how will that be investigated? And in relation to the North Perth plan, I just wanted to raise where it talks about to review activation of North Perth Common. I wondered whether we needed to consider further work required and whether we could potentially consider repeating the EOI to open up that space for free use to try to get further activation happening there. And in relation to the Mount Hawthorn youth space, I wondered whether there'd been any consideration of using one of our halls, or whether that could be considered as part of the Britannia Reserve West master plan if we're thinking more about external rather than internal facilities. And just in terms of marketing and branding, I just wanted to seek clarification that all resources are going towards Visit Perth and that there won't be any town centre specific marketing and branding done through the City of Vincent.
To you, Mayor Cole, I will take the question about the power in town centres on notice and provide some more information on that in the briefing notes. In relation to North Perth Common and the activation of that space, at the moment we are focused on that data collection of how people are using the space at the moment, but I'm happy for the director to provide some information regarding the activation of those events calendars and the marketing plan in general. But from my understanding, we are putting our resources into Visit Perth.
I'm happy for you to take the other ones on notice. That was about the Mount Hawthorn Youth Space and how we can continue to push activation of the North Perth Common.
To you, Mayor Cole, I will take the youth space on notice, as well as the activations of North Perth Common, unless the director has any comments on that.
Thank you. Are there any further comments, questions rather? Sorry, Councillor Gontaszewski.
Just one further one. So if my understanding is that the corporate business plan identifies that the Woodville Reserve Master Plan has a tick in 2021 and then dashes in the 3 following financial years. And I haven't found the View Street design one yet, but I'm going to look. But if the intention is that that project is now being delayed because of the facilities plan, does the corporate business plan require updating? And therefore, do we need to have that included as part of the recommendation? Or is there another mechanism that we can ensure synchronicity between the place plans and the corporate business plan?
Through you, Mayor Cole, just to provide some clarity on that, we will actually commence work on Woodville. That's why you see a tick there. And the dashes, I believe, in the corporate business plan are showing that there is not budget at the moment flagged in the long-term financial plan, but we would be looking to look at that through the annual budget process.
I'm still very confused about dashes and ticks, but thank you very much for that clarification.
Councillors, anything further? Okay. Thank you very much, Manager. We'll move to Infrastructure and Environment 6.1 late report response to petition e-permit implementation update. We don't have the report yet, but would anyone like to flag any questions in advance? Councillor Hallett.
I'm just wondering if we can get some information about the consultation and feedback that's been collected during the initial implementation.
Yep, through your call, we can include what we've got.
Councillor Gontaszewski had a question.
Oh, just so no verbal update to be provided. It's not ready to even give a high-level overview at this stage?
I could try. I wasn't expecting to, but yeah, I think we went live on Monday, or was it last week? I know we've got more than 1,000 people who've activated their accounts, so that's 25%. I know that we've had a few people that needed assistance, but we've managed to assist them all at this stage. So either by a telephone call to help them set up the account, or a couple of people came into the library. So we haven't found a situation that we haven't managed to resolve yet. So from a project perspective, it's going well, I think. And we have instigated a survey today as well, just to ask the people who've registered how it's going, what they thought of the system. So hopefully I'll have some of that next week for the report.
Councillors, Councillor Hallett. Oh, sorry, were you continuing? Okay, I'll come back to you.
We can tag team. Just in relation to that, are we doing any consultation with people who haven't signed up to the system?
Through Michael, that's planned to go with the follow-up letter, which is to to remind people about creating the account and then asking them if they've got any problems. So that's the follow-up letter.
And also, what does administration have any proposal for residents unable to access the online system, either for technological reasons or due to disability and other accessibility needs?
So Michael, yes, we do, and we'll include that in the report.
Councillors? Okay, we'll wait for the report. Can I just ask when that would be expected?
So Michael, we're hoping to have it Friday to go with the papers for council next week.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to Community and Business Services next, and first item 7.1, outcome of advertising and adoption of amendments purchasing policy. Any questions on this? Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Nicole. Our reconciliation action plan includes the target of 5% expenditure from the arts and culture budget to be through Aboriginal owned businesses. I was just wondering if it would be appropriate to include that within this policy. Additionally, I think the state government has the Aboriginal procurement policy, which sets a target of, I think it's 3% of all procurement to go through Aboriginal owned businesses, and whether administration thinks it would be appropriate to adopt a similar policy for Vincent.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, I'll provide a more detailed response in the notes, but there are, we also are constrained by the Local Government Act and some provisions with regards to the Act and regs relating to Aboriginal organisations. So I'll just compare those two and give you some feedback on that.
Thank you. And in regard to the sustainability policy, I think we just have some general references to our larger strategic objectives. Would it be appropriate to mandate a part of the assessment of any tender to include an assessment of sustainability? So like 5% of assessment criteria, something like that.
Mayor Cole, I'll take that one on notice.
Sorry, one more. So like the local government review panel report had some comments around the Walga procurement panels and whether they actually provided value for money. And it was the opinion, I think, of a lot of submissions that just being on the panel didn't prove that you were providing value for money. So I think we've got various thresholds for procurement and the requirements for the number of written quotes that we need to seek at each of those thresholds. And that includes a reduction in the number that we're required to seek if we're going to the Walga panel. So I think given that there's significant doubts, and I think well-justified doubts about whether the Walga panel ensures value for money, would it be appropriate to kind of remove that lessened number of written quotes that are required if we're going to the panel? So we just kind of have like a flat number of quotes that are required for each procurement threshold.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll take that one on notice as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Hallett.
Just to follow up to the question about the reference to sustainability in there, and just wondering if there, well, given that it's not, if you've got any commentary on the inclusion of public health given the adoption of our plan?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll take that one on notice as well. Thanks.
Do we have any existing contracts with companies on the WGEA non-compliant list, and what would be the implication of approving this policy change on those arrangements?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I believe we don't have any organisations on that list. I'll confirm, but I'm pretty sure that that's the case.
Are you able to provide any examples of circumstances that would result in no written quote needing to be provided and where a notation of a verbal quote is sufficient?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I will get a little bit more information on that, but just to provide an example that I believe might illustrate that, it could be if we were in an emergency situation. So say, for example, if Beatty Park needs to make an urgent repair to a piece of machinery on a weekend and they are getting an electrician to come and assist them, it might be that they haven't had a chance to ring around and get a number of quotes, but they have a reasonable understanding of what would be an acceptable price for that particular piece of work to be done at that particular time. But I would expect that in the majority of cases, we should be able to get some comparative quotes.
In relation to the tendering exemptions in section 6.6, how exactly would administration determine value for money when not tendering to multiple businesses?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll take that one on notice as well.
In relation to the panel of pre-qualified suppliers, what panels do we already have and how have the policy objectives been determined to be quantifiably established for these? That's fine, on notice.
Thanks, Mayor Cole. I will take that on notice.
In the report, it states nil under sustainability implications. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I would suspect it is correct if it's got, I think the author of the report would be suggesting that the implementation of this particular report is not in itself going to cause any sustainability issues, as opposed to the content of the policy itself, which we have already discussed has sustainability implications.
And this, you may have the same answer for this, although it's slightly different. This relates to this one and all the other reports. There doesn't appear to be a public health implications section added to any of the reports. And are you able to advise on this absence and when it's expected that that will be included?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I've been just advised that we are updating our template, so we will have that included in future.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just a further question in relation to the tendering exemptions. It's in the policy, it talks to the CEO being delegated or approved to determine that public tenders do not need to be invited. If public tenders, if the procurement decisions relating to the purchase thresholds above $250,000 are a council decision, how does this policy ensure that council's decision in relation to whether the public threshold or the exemption has actually been met it doesn't appear that there's that alignment between the two, and just wondering if that was what reasons were considered in relation to that threshold.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll take that one on notice and respond.
Any further questions? Okay. Okay, moving on to 7.3, authorisation of expenditure for the period 1st to 30th of September 2020. Any questions? Councillor Gontaszewski.
Just had a question on how the DevCo report was going in relation to the last month's expenditure. Crew?
Yeah, through Mayor Cole, so that work is still ongoing, because remember, I think you might have even mentioned there were 68 payments in 1 month. So it's taken a little bit of time to go back in history and differentiate between contract payments and outside contracts. So, but we haven't forgotten, and we'll include in a future report.
Just noting that there's more disputed transactions in the credit card authorisation for payment. Just wondering whether that's considered that our, I guess, monitoring processes have improved and are picking those up where we perhaps didn't before, or if there's sort of an element of risk associated with the use of credit cards for, I think, particularly a number of international purchases.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we have had a particular issue a couple of months running, and And what I've actually done is it seems to relate to some international subscriptions, and what we've done is completely refreshed all of the accounts and passwords for those subscriptions, because as soon as I got the card reissued, I had the same thing occur after those subscriptions got processed. So we are successful in getting the default payments reversed, but we've also put in some other mechanisms to sort out the underlying issue as well.
The catering for the Are You OK Day, just wondering where that event was held. It's just that's a higher bill than for like all of our Travel Smart events. So I was just wondering on that one.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I suspect that was an internal event, but I'll confirm that.
And I noticed that we're still paying for fencing at Cheriton Street property, and was just wondering on the back of that expenditure, albeit small, what the status is in relation to the city's obligations in terms of the Cheriton Street property. I will confess I thought we had intended to hand that back to the state government.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we are still in liaison with the Department of Communities about that, and it does relate to ongoing management of the very small community garden at the back of that lot, and we can provide an update in the briefing notes on that.
Okay, any other questions? Nope. Okay, we shall move on to the investment report, item 7.4, investment report as at 30th of September 2020. Any questions? Councillor Hallett.
The graph's a little bit blurry, but the proportion of investments exposed to fossil fuels seems to have increased slightly since last month. Do we know what the reason for that is?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole. I think I put some additional comments in the detail of the report, but effectively the team have kept a bit of our, have kept some of our municipal funds in the Commonwealth Bank online saver account for a period of a month or two. And when we use our basic bank account, if you like, that one has a default setting of being non-compliant from that perspective. But in subsequent months, we're actually moving it. It's just at the moment, we're trying to identify the best place to put the money to maximise our interest rate returns. But we're certainly looking at the fossil fuel outcomes as well.
Thank you. And in the report, it also states nil under sustainability implications. Is your response the same as the previous one?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, it is. I suspect from an officer's perspective, they're talking about if this report was to be approved or supported or endorsed by council, would there be any adverse sustainability issues? And we would say no. So there are no sustainability outcomes with regards to implementing this report.
Okay, any further questions on investments? Okay. Oh yes, Councillor Wallace.
Sorry, one more. Just in terms of how we're classifying whether we're invested in fossil fuel items or not, is for us, this graph that says fossil fuel investment, is that invested in institutions that also fund fossil fuel related activities, or is that we actually have money invested in a account or investment option offered by these institutions that, you know, owns fossil fuel assets?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll confirm whether it's the institution or the actual account. I suspect it's the institution. So if we put anything with Commonwealth Bank, for example, then they are not considered to be fossil fuel friendly. So we then need to look for an alternative provider, but I'll confirm that understanding for you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor Cole.
Thank you. Any further questions? Right. That takes us to item 7.5, financial statements as at 30th of September 2020. Any questions? No. Okay, just if it was subtle. Okay, we'll move on to item 7.6, first quarterly budget review questions. Councillor Hallett.
This is different. In this report, there isn't a heading for sustainability implications, and just wondering if there's an issue with the template.
Through you, Mayor Cole, it sounds like there may be. I'll certainly fix that.
Go ahead, Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you. Just in relation to the, was it 109,000 overspend at Banks Reserve, can I just get some more information on this? Who authorised the additional expenditure, and given that it was an approved project, who authorised the exception report, and whether it was meant to come to council and didn't?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yeah, I picked that up today when I read the report again. So if I could take the question on notice, we can explain that.
Just step back in time. Just in relation to the solar installation at Perth Soccer Club, when we discussed this in our main budget meetings, there were some questions asked by council in relation to the proposed mechanism of having a loan or a financial agreement with the club whereby the city would undertake the expenditure so the installation could be completed, but the club would enter into an agreement to pay back the cost over a particular period of time. And I understand from the papers that this is proposed to, that the installation is proposed to be included in the budget review, and that the loan mechanism is intended on being utilised. Just questions in relation to if the city is proposing to roll out this mechanism to other organisations to fund capital upgrades, who would qualify, whether the city intends to recommend to council any further expenditure on city-owned buildings that are leased, or will all expenditure related to capital upgrades be tied to the ability of clubs to enter into loans, how the city determines whether a loan is considered viable, and which sort of expenditure might qualify for one of these loans.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I see this as merely putting a budget provision in so that we can implement that, that initiative. But I also note that our earlier conversation was that before it progressed, we would need to have council's agreement as to what the self-supporting loan mechanism would look like and how it would operate. So I would suggest that we need to do that piece of work, and that would then be a precursor to any approval continuing in terms of the spend of the 30,000.
Thank you for that. That's useful information. Just wondering, I recall that the expenditure on the solar installation for Perth Soccer Club was part of the forward planning in terms of the city-funded solar installation, just not in this financial year, and just wondering if the club was aware that that was part of our forward planning, or whether they were not made aware that that was something that was proposed in future years.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll take that one on notice. I'm not sure what they were aware of or what they weren't aware of.
Thank you. I'd had some discussion with the Executive Director of Community and Business and the Executive Director of Infrastructure and Environment in relation to the budget papers, budget review papers, in terms of the street cleaning in town centres, maybe steam cleaning. And I understood that that the issue of some potential additional cleaning within town centres had been discussed and was being considered for incorporation through this budget review, and but I couldn't see it referenced anywhere within the papers, and just wondering, obviously I presume it's part of a higher level aggregate figure, but just wondering where that might be represented within the documents that we have.
Through you, Mayor Cole, the the process that we went through, we had the officers and managers provide us with adjustments to the operating expenditure to reflect changes to ordinary activities that perhaps required modification because our COVID status was different. So, for example, Betty Park coming back online, the activities have obviously changed there, and therefore they have put in place more staffing, more utility costs and more revenue. Similarly, on the infrastructure side, the staff acknowledged that they were requiring to do more cleaning in the town centres because of increased activity. So they have put that in to their budget submissions, and it is in the underlying figures that are included in the operating statements by nature and type. I think in my discussion with the manager, it's a provision of about $10,000, but it came out in terms of it was rolled up in the overall submission that they put forward. I think my email correspondence to you was that we're recommending that we end up with a surplus of $952,000. That is after that $10,000 has been applied.
So in terms of council being able to have some transparency over that consideration and what those figures are. So my understanding is that there's been an assessment within administration and that there's been some adjustments to operational expenditure and the like as a result of changed position in terms of COVID. However, we haven't really seen that particularly addressed in the reporting. And so I guess my questions are around which operational activities that were reduced or shelved during COVID have been recommenced and what the financial implications are of that change. And then I guess just by perhaps, I don't know, management unit, I don't want to be too arduous, around whether we're able to get some clarity on what the current approved figure is and what the proposed figure is, just to have that as a transparency mechanism.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I can provide a little bit more detail at the next level down at the activity level, and I think that will probably provide you with that degree of granularity without needing to get too pedantic, but just to give you an idea of the recommendations that have come through from the business, just to, I suppose, shift the business up a notch as we are adjusting to sort of this COVID environment or post-COVID environment.
Yeah, hopefully post-COVID environment, long may it rain. Okay, so thank you for that. I guess my other question related to events. My understanding is that the proposed disbursement of events funding in the papers relates to civic events and internal city events and events, and then I guess our infrastructure requirements to support those events. Just wondering whether it had been considered to put forward support for events around Christmas and in the first half of the financial year, or whether that has been incorporated into this increase in operational expenditure.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, we have within our existing budget, we've put about $30,000 to $40,000, I can't remember the exact figure, into our Christmas program for this year. That's already well underway, and it involves various activities, including Christmas decorations and having the children's market and a few key activations like that. So that is already factored into the existing budget. What that does is it effectively depletes our event budget as at sort of the 31st of December. And so we're proposing to increase it by another 40,000. So that allows us enough to be able to get involved in town team activations and particularly to support the Vincent Rebound Plan. So that's sort of in the second half of the year. And then in addition to that, we are doing a detailed event review as well in the month of December, which we will discuss with council. So at the mid-year review, I would expect that we can have a much more informed decision and discussion about events more generally as to what we want to do. So I think we've got enough there we've got some provisions there to take us through to the 30th of June, and then we can actually review that in a bit more detail at mid-year review if we need to.
And mid-year review is March. Yep.
Correct.
Can I just ask, just on the back of this, we normally fund some pretty big events that would be quite reliant upon our sponsorship. So I was wondering what we're going to do about St. Patrick's Day, which I think we normally fund about $20,000. Hyde Park Fair, $20,000 plus in kind for both of these events. I'm not sure whether the Lunar New Year celebration will happen, but these are things that we would need to provide some surety around funding so that those organisers can plan to go ahead if they need to. So I guess my question is, what contact have we had with St. Pat's and Hyde Park coordinators around those events happening? And I'll just probably flag my preference would be that if we are going to fund those events because they're going ahead, my preference would be that we allocate that budget at this review, not any later, because I don't think that would give people enough. So just in terms of the sorts of events, Pride, I understand we're already allocating $10,000. Lunar New Year, I think previously cost about $7,000. St. Patrick's Day is $20,000 plus in-kind support. Hyde Park, $20,000 plus in-kind support. And it sounds like the town teams and any Christmas events would be potentially covered already by the $40,000 allocation, because I'm aware that, for example, Leederville Connect want to have their Arty Farty children's Christmas party and they'll need street closure funding, etc. So could I please request that we have further information about that? And if we do need additional allocation, I'd suggest that we could take $50,000 from the money going into reserve and that we could take that additional $26,000 that hasn't been allocated. Sorry, Susan, I just thought that was relevant.
Yep, that tidies it up very nicely.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Cole, I do have a list of those typical items, so I can come back with some recommendations. As you're aware, the year has been a little bit changeable. Hyde Park wasn't sure if they were going to have their fair, and they've only just come back to us and they're quite late in their cycle. So we are sort of working with each of these organisers based on what they're trying to achieve. As you know, Pride went with a dramatically different configuration this year. So I'll come back with some suggestions in the briefing notes and we can see if we can build that into our quarterly review.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I think this one's to the Executive Director of Infrastructure and Environment. It just relates to the further costs required for the demolition of the Banks Reserve Pavilion. Just to confirm, is that now sitting at 90,000? Or was this because there was a 50 that should have been a 70 somewhere?
Through Mayor Cole, I'll need to take that one on notice.
And just in relation to the CCTV for the precinct we're in, if the city is currently reviewing its CCTV, I guess, objectives, can I just get an understanding of the rationale around that expenditure? Previously, the city has installed CCTV in, I guess, hotspot areas, and whether this installation is considered to align with that.
So, Nicole, so that they are the request is for building security purposes, not general outdoor public security, and they're in the main existing systems that are not functioning, so the building security is inadequate.
Thank you for that. Just in relation to the additional costs for the Beatty Park casuals of $724,000 due to normal operations, is this for the how does the close impact that number, or is this number not to do with the casuals that would be impacted by closing the pool?
It's taken the close into account, and it's for the full year impact of the casuals operating for the full year, bar the time where the pool is closed.
I think that might be it.
I'm taking my cue. Councillors?
Through Mayor Cole, just to clarify the question from Councillor Gondaszewski on Banks Reserve, I think we have identified a need for an additional public toilet since the opening of the playground down there. I'm not sure if that might have related to the adjustment in the cost between 70 and 90,000, given the increased demand on the one public toilet down there since the playground's been opened.
One would hope that we weren't being provided with information that said we needed funds for demolition where it was for capital works for a new facility. So I trust that would be clarified in the briefing notes.
Councillors, I have a few quick questions. I just wanted to clarify, because it talks in the report about there being an additional allocation for Dr. Verge. I'm aware there is a backlog and for local plant sales, but it doesn't appear on the list. So I'm wondering, where is that found?
That's Mayor Cole, that's one of the underlying budget items that has been broken out and specified, but it's included in the operating budget by nature and type.
Okay.
And I'll include that detail in that breakdown I discussed previously.
I'd be interested to know, does that mean we're going back to 2 plant sales per year? And could I just also get some update on what that would do to the backlog and waiting list? Because I think at the moment Dr. Verge is backlogged until August next year. So it'd be good to know. I also just wanted to ask about which reserve the $683,000 from the land sales will be going into, and has the Public Open Space Reserve been established as recommended from the Public Open Space Strategy, or where will that sit?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I can answer that question. So the Finance Manager advised that the Public Open Space Reserve hasn't been created as yet. And so we are suggesting to temporarily assign it to the Asset Management Sustainability Reserve. And then pending the creation of that reserve, we can then seek Council's approval to move it.
Okay, thank you. I think that was all, because the main thing that I was really picking up on was the need to get across events and what's happening with our events that we normally sponsor. I also just wanted to check the kids market. I assume that that's already covered in the budget at North Perth Common?
Yes, Mayor Cole, it is, yeah.
Thank you. All right, any further questions? No, okay, thank you, Director. We'll move to Chief Executive Officer items 8.1, City of Vincent Advisory Groups. Questions? Councillor Gondaszewski.
A note with the Safer Vincent Advisory Group that the permanent external members are representatives from the police, and that agencies such as Noel Patrol and Uniting Care are to be called on an as required basis. Just, I guess, foreshadowing an amendment to include them as, ongoing members of the group. And I guess would be grateful for commentary on that.
Yeah, so through Mayor Cole, I think the thinking is that when you look at the variety of things in the Safer Vincent plan, then that would involve a variety of agencies depending on what the agenda was. So to have, Nowhere Outreach as a permanent member, might be a bit of a high expectation when the range of items, you've mentioned CCTV, graffiti, it's much wider than the kind of things that agency deals with. So the theory is that they would be invited when the agenda required it, rather than be standing members. We haven't got a list of all the agencies that we might invite, and we just given that one as an example.
Yeah, a note that I guess the rationale behind the proposed amendment would relate to the fact that we have a funding agreement with those agencies for the provision of services. So I don't think it would be an undue expectation that there might be some representation on an ongoing basis just so we can get updates. But I take on board your advice.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Nicole. It's just a question about whether I can be added as a member of the Sustainability and Transport Advisory Group as part of this. Please.
That will be at council's discretion.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'd just, that would just relate to the terms of reference and the number of, I think children and young people have up to 3 council members in the terms of reference. Arts Advisory Group mentions 2 council members, and it's entirely up to
say something.
It's entirely up to council to decide the terms of reference. The current draft for adoption has 2 council members listed for the Sustainability and Transport Advisory Group. It's purely a council decision.
Can I confirm that if any council member is allowed to attend any advisory meeting that they want? Is that correct?
Yes.
Through Mayor Cole, yes.
So theoretically, Councillor Wallace could come along to the stag if he so chose, without any changes to the policy. Is that right?
Through Mayor Cole, yes.
You can always put up an amendment and see how you go if you really feel strongly.
No, that's fine. You just send me the calendar invites. Thanks.
Well, I'll ask administration to arrange that. I don't do the calendar invites for advisory groups. Yes, I'm getting to that. Thank you. I just wanted, sorry, I know that Susan was asking these questions, but can I just have confirmation? I'm very keen to see Noongar Outreach and Uniting Care WA as standing members of the Safer Vincent group. Would that have to be moved by amendment? Okay, I think that anyone that we have a partnership agreement with would be good to have them around the table. I also just wanted to know whether we need as many staff as listed at the advisory groups, just for efficiency and reasons. I note that some of the terms of reference talk about the appropriate director or manager as determined and the relevant city officer, but some of them do have substantial staffing attached to them. Obviously, that's administration's call, but it's just a question. And yes, I'm also just seeking whether there's any interest in being involved in the Safer Vincent group as a chair or as a member. Just have a staring competition and see what happens. Okay, I will come to you on the email during the week and hope for a more exciting response. Thank you. Okay.
Mayor, can I just add on that? Because I was reticent to put my hand up too early, just in case it got misinterpreted, like at an auction. But point 4.4, I just did want to ask the question whether there had been consideration given to reducing the number of police. I mean, one of the issues for police being able to attend all the representatives at all the meetings, one of the options that did come up of being either between Perth and Wembley a rotational, or whether Peter from Wembley might want to take on that on a more regular, and then as issues pertaining to Bayswater and Perth come up, maybe a call in if we get an issue that relates specifically to those. But having representatives from all 3 police stations at the meeting, I did find it could be a little bit of an overkill.
Through Mayor Cole, I don't think in practice we'd expect for representatives for any one meeting, but we could clarify with the chair when we set the agenda which police station or police representatives would best match the agenda items being discussed So I think we could possibly clarify the language at 4.4 to say to include a WAPOL representative from one of the following divisions of the police force.
Okay, any further questions on advisory groups? I'm coming at you for nominations during the week. Okay, we'll move on to 8.2, Sustainable Environment Strategy 2019 to 2024 Progress Update. Any questions? Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. I just noticed in the report that a number of the targets have already been achieved. So would administration look to revise those targets, for example, with the tree canopy target?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the report does highlight that we outperformed on some of the metrics, not through design, but due to COVID and the fact that many of our buildings and facilities wouldn't have drawn down on the expected energy, gas and water during the COVID restrictions. We could potentially take that up at the next meeting of the Sustainability and Transport Advisory Group on whether or not we should reinsert some more ambitious targets around those areas, particularly you just mentioned urban tree canopy, and that would potentially relate to what Council decides on the greening budget for next financial year.
So I guess specifically on the greening part, we're at, I think it was 24% and our target was 23 point, I have 5 or 6 or something like that. I assume that's not going to go backwards, or I really hope it doesn't. So is it possible to identify what we think that target, even if we don't plant any more trees, that would still increase in the next couple of years? Is that fair?
Through Mayor Cole, yes, it was only, the target was 23.3% by 2023, and the progress to date is 24%. Obviously, as the trees that we've planted over the years grow, they'll add increasing proportions of shade and tree canopy cover. That said, additional areas for planting may become more difficult. So we might run into diminishing returns as we get to some of the smaller sites, some of the smaller car parks, for instance, that we've identified for public tree planting.
And then would it be possible to amend the Sustainable Environment Strategy as part of this report to say that we wanted to change that target to 25% or something like that?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, Council could amend any of its strategies. I don't think that would require public consultation to amend that strategy. We may not, well, we'll have to consider whether or not we re-edit or reformat the document, or just add an addendum to the strategy to add a page about any changes or revisions in those targets.
And what would be an appropriate target now for tree canopy?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I wouldn't like to make one up on the run, but through you, Mayor Cole, if we could potentially put that on the agenda for the next meeting of the advisory group to consider the urban tree canopy target vis-a-vis what the city has planned in terms of greening expenditure.
Thank you. Can I request an amendment to do that referral of the targets to the Sustainability and Transport Advisory Group for consideration at their next meeting, please?
Through Mayor Cole, yes, we'll prepare that amendment.
The other part I wanted to just ask about was the carbon target. So it says that we're on track, and I just wanted to clarify how do we determine that sort of tracking process? Is that a linear process? So we basically draw a straight line from where we're at and where we're headed to, and as long as we're below that or similar to that, then we're on target. Is that the mechanism?
Through Mayor Cole, I might get a diagram or table drawn up, which we could put in the briefing notes to show that line and how we're progressing to zero by 2030.
And then my other question was just around, I guess, specifically with Beatty Park, my understanding is we are not able to install sufficient solar across that structure to offset the carbon footprint that we have from it. And we're not currently able to install capacity elsewhere to then offset those that consumption as well. So how do we get to net zero without that ability to install stuff, to install additional solar? Is that through offsets, or is that still to be determined?
Through you, Mayor Cole, just to clarify, is that question related just on Beatty Park as a standalone facility, or the city buildings in totality?
I guess it's probably across the whole target, but recognising that Beatty Park is probably the most challenging one for us. It's our largest energy consumer, and it is, to my understanding, unable to. There isn't enough space to install solar panels and so forth to offset those emissions.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, that's correct. And just given the aged nature of those buildings, they obviously, a lot of the city buildings weren't constructed in mind to have rooftop solar in an efficient and complete format. I'll take on notice that question about the gap between our energy targets and our potential solar capacity on existing sites, and dig up some of the business case work that we did on that analysis previously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Loden. Councillor Gontaszewski.
Just further to Councillor Loder's request for an amendment in relation to referral to the STAG around the target, could I just request that the consideration of that amendment both also includes reference to how that advice would be received back to council, and how under what vehicle council might make a decision to amend a target? And I guess also just whether we could get some advice from the city's internal resources in relation to that target, whether, just in case that referral was not actually required.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we don't think I wouldn't think a formal amendment is required to put that this discussion topic on the agenda of the next STAG. Councillor Loden and Councillor Hallett are the chair and co-chair, and could request that be discussed, and administration would arrange for any advice back from the STAG, which recommends council amend a strategy target to be put into a formal report, potentially by the following meeting.
Any further questions? Okay. Oh, all right. Councillor Wallace. Sorry, was that not expressing my excitement? It's 9 o'clock, you know. We shall continue. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just in relation to the additional trees that have been planted, I think not proposed to be planted in that figure that was attached. As a southerner, I couldn't help but note they're mostly in the North Ward. I was wondering if there was a particular reason for that distribution. Can we get some more trees in the South too?
Chairman Cole, I have to take that question on notice.
Thanks. What was I going to ask? I noted in one of the town centre place plans that you'd undertaken some consultation with Telstra around one of their sites in one of the town centres, and I wondered if you'd undertake any similar consultation around their exchange on the corner of Bulwer and William Street, and whether that site was also being considered for eco-zoning.
Chairman Cole, I have to take that one on notice as well.
And then last one around greenhouse gas emissions as well. I still think there's kind of like a bit of an elephant in the room about with this some large unquantified greenhouse gas emissions that the city's producing. I was just wondering for a progress update on our quantification of our scope 1, 2, 3 emissions.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I think the chair of the STAG might better help me on this, because it was discussed when the Sustainable Environment Strategy was adopted, that I think we had listed the investigation of those scope 3 emissions as work to be done in preparation for the 5-year point of the current strategy?
Yeah, my understanding was it would be in the next strategy. So we would do the work now to then assess those outcomes, and then that would be included in the reporting for next SES.
And through you, Mayor Cole, this might just be a general comment or observation about the greenways and planting for street trees. As you do move further north away from the CBD, the streets become less constrained, bigger and wider, and they might therefore provide more deep soil or soft planting areas to get more trees in. So I think tree for tree, it's harder work the closer you get towards the CBD. Would be a general comment, but we'll get some specifics on the balance between the wards.
Okay, ready to move on. The next item is report and minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on the 20th October 2020. It's item 8.3. Are there any questions? Okay. The next meeting, 8.4, council briefing and ordinary meeting of council dates for 2021. Any questions? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just very quickly, I just want to check with the administration that you're comfortable with a meeting on the 27th of April, which is the day after a long weekend, and whether that's going to cause any issues with turnaround time from a briefing to a meeting.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I do recall that this was a bit of an issue this year. We could look what the other options are around those April dates.
And thank you. And, you know, it may be that is the best option, but I just thought I'd raise it. Equally, I noticed that the finish date is quite late for next year, and whether you foresee any issues with the final council meeting being the 14th of December, which is in the midst of a lot of event season and also doesn't leave a lot of time until shutdown after that final council meeting.
Through you, Mayor Cole, what we do try to finalise the annual report by that date, which is a key issue, and the previous item was about the audit committee, for instance, and we are pushing back we're going to speak to audit committee meeting members about pushing back the audit committee date because we are still have a few delays with the OAG audit process and finalising some of the financials around that. Again, this probably just reflects the move to a monthly cycle and trying to get those two meetings in each calendar month.
Yes, Councillor Gontaszewski.
Just a question. So my understanding is that the AGM of electors will be held on the 2nd of February and then the briefing is proposed to be held on the 9th of February. Just wondering why the briefing and meeting dates weren't brought forward so that the briefing and AGM occurred on the 2nd of February, just to start a bit earlier.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we can reflect on that. I think it may have been about the preparation of the meeting agendas and potentially circulating those well. Otherwise, there might be a lot of staff on leave or councillors who also might be on leave. So happy to take advice from councillors on that.
I think if you could just include some commentary in the briefing notes, we can consider next week. I guess AGMs aren't usually super long. So I think of an evening, both meetings can be accommodated on the same night. But yeah, we'll take on board the advice in relation to preparation of meeting papers.
It's a good question. I'm interested because this year we started the council briefing on the 4th and this is the 9th. So it's like 5 days later, and then the council meeting was on the 11th, whereas this is the 16th. So it does start to kind of feel like you're starting reasonably late in the year. So I would also think that would be welcome advice about preparation of agendas, etc. Most of us are back. We start on the 26th of January for Australia Day. Okay, any further questions on dates for council meetings? No. Okay, we shall move then to, we've dealt with 8.5, so we'll go to 8.6, advertising of new policy, attendance at events. Any questions? I did have one question. I was interested just in the policy where it talks about 1.3, and this is the events that are, what's the wording? Yeah, it says events held at the city, at any facility owned by the city, including facilities on land vested in the city. So does that mean if you went to a 21st birthday party at a North Perth, oh, we don't do 21st at North Perth Town Hall. Or if you went to the Greek souvlaki night at Florida Athena and they provided you with free food, for example, like I think that I get the intent, but it could create some grey where it is a purely private event that just happens to be someone private hiring a facility for their own personal use and then lavishing a council member with gifts, which doesn't happen in the City of Vincent. But just in terms of future-proofing this policy, I just thought that potentially needed to be fleshed out a little bit. And I also just had a question about if you've declared a non-approved event, it says that the elected member must disclose this interest to the CEO and must be absent from consideration of the matter. Just a question around, is it going to be always a financial interest? Could it be an impartiality interest that ultimately council under our meeting procedures can vote on whether people can remain in the chamber? As an example, I went to a book launch of a local business who, because the person is on the literal town team, I went to the event, I bought my own drink and I bought a copy of the cookbook and I left. Well, I chatted to people. But I'm declaring that with $0 attached to it. Does that mean that if they then sought to do something at their business that I would have to preclude myself? Because I think that's probably going too far.
Through you, Mayor Cole, just to go to your first question, which was about 1.3, about an event held at any facility owned by the city, including facilities on land vested in the city. I think that the way this is constructed is there's probably a very close link between 1.3 and 1.5, which is that any events held by community groups or clubs, not-for-profits, who are probably those who would take our very affordable hall hire rates. I think the intent of the policy is largely to try to exclude higher cost corporate events, particularly events that might be being run by corporates who are seeking to do business with the city or private developers, for instance. And that probably relates to the second question about whether an elected member would need to exclude themselves from a matter for an event that that wasn't on the approved list. There was some very specific language in the City of Perth inquiry. I think the case study, or not the case study, the example was the former CEO of the City of Perth did attend an event of a supplier of a service or a potential contract, and then there was a discussion held, and then that company subsequently did win business with the city. And I think the implication of that, or the finding, was that by attending a corporate event of a potential supplier to the city, then if that came before council, there's a perception that the attendance of that event by a corporate potential supplier of goods or service to the city creates a...
I get that, that's quite straightforward, but what I'm saying is that if you go along to an event of a small business because they're a member of a town team, or it's because you want to support your local businesses that are doing innovative and fantastic things, but you don't receive free gifts at the event, that's, like I'm saying, does this actually need to be like disclosures can be dealt with through our meeting procedures, and what action then has to happen? So I'm just wondering whether this needs to state that this must be disclosed to the CEO or presiding member and dealt with at the council meeting, rather than being explicit about what the action is, depending on the nature of the event, the nature of whether a gift was received, whether it was over $50 or under $50, because some of us do make declarations regardless of the value. I just think that's very black and white when, yes, it's good to be black and white, but there are other provisions that are higher order, such as our local law, meeting procedures, local law, that have a different approach. So they have to align, and the local law would take precedence over the policy.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I agree that the last bit of 4, the last section of that sentence, must be absent from consideration of the matter unless council approves otherwise. That could be phrased not in the absolute, but it would be council would there need to consider that declaration.
As we do under the meeting procedures local law. And
so we can modify that language.
Yeah, and then you've also might want to look at the 5 and see, you know, whether that would, for example, I can just see situations where people have attended meetings based on them being a small business or a business in Vincent, where this, you know, where we just need to be sure about where we stand before going to these events. Not that there are many of them. Anyway, just a query, as this is the purpose of this forum. Are there any other questions on the events policy? Okay, thank you. You wanted to say something?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. I think the conflict would nearly always come into play if there was a tender or procurement decision before council where one or maybe the preferred supplier had previously hosted an event. So I think that was...
I think that we're very clear about that. I'm asking for the more obscure things where we might support our very small local businesses who are part of our town teams, who from time to time might say, hey, I'm really excited because I've launched a book. Would you like to come? And there's no accepting of free books or free drinks, etc. That's what I'm just trying to give a different type of example as opposed to suppliers. I don't ever hang out with suppliers. Anyway, look forward to receiving some advice on that. Any further questions? Okay, last item, 8.7 information bulletin. Any questions? Councillor Hallett.
Just a quick one. I think the minutes from the STAG meeting on the 3rd of September that were approved on the 29th of October should be included.
Through Mayor Cole, we'll chase those minutes up and have them included.
Any further questions on the info bulletin? Councillor Layden, I think you froze there for a minute. Go ahead.
The one time it freezes, hey? I'll have a chat with I2. I wanted to query about the development application summary that we have. It shows the last few months a gradual trend in increase in number of applications. Just wanted to check that we're sufficiently resourced there because we're processing them at a slower rate than they're coming in.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, we have our budget forecast initially was for a 40% decrease in development application revenue, and our actuals are actually, we're even compared to where we were this time last year. So we are considering the resourcing of processing those applications at the moment.
Any further questions? Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you. Through Nicole, to the Acting Executive Director of Strategy and Development, just in relation to the Register of SAT appeals as at 28 October 2020, I note that the matter relating to 3 Bulwer Avenue, Perth, appears to be, there appears to have been a new development application lodged with the city in September and is currently under assessment by administration. and the directions hearing on 9 October 2020 was adjourned to 4 December 2020 to await determination of the development application. Just have a question in relation to that as to whether that would be determined under delegated authority or, given the history of this application, whether it would be coming to council for consideration.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll need to take that question on notice and answer in the briefing notes.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything more on the information bulletin? Okay. No motions of which previous notice have been given. Any flagging of noms?
Yeah, I'll probably send one at the end of the week.
Are you thinking of
The
sending?
park one again. So no, I'm going to try and figure out a open space designation for dog walking.
Right. Okay. Great.
Oh, and I guess also pending the report in relation to the e-permits, foreshadowing a potential notice of motion in relation to alternative permit issuing technology, etc.
I think we get the gist. Anyone else? Okay. Representative.
Sorry, Mayor Cole.
Yes.
It was going to be a joke one anyway. I was just going to say I was going to put forward a nom for the authorization of $100 worth of expenditure on cable management in the chambers.
Yeah. It's pretty messy, hey?
Through Mayor Cole, quick comment on that. Councillor Topperberg did ask whether or not we could schedule a discussion, which I was going to propose for the workshop on the 27th of March to talk about the future to replace the 25-year-old chairs and tables that we're currently using.
Chairs and tables are fine. The cables are the issue.
Okay.
Is there any particular response to the cable issue only? Is this permanent? No?
Through you, Michael. So I think we just need to decide on the final layout of the chamber, and then we can put the electrics back in permanently. And I think that's the discussion that the CEO wants to have. And yeah, I think you said March, CEO, but I think you meant in a couple of weeks' time.
The final layout of the chamber. Okay. All right. Well, with that, I'll close the meeting at 19 minutes past 9. Thank you very much, everybody. And for those who've tuned in, we thank you for